Born Celeste DuPont in a small Louisiana town, the woman who would become Madame Celeste had a childhood steeped in poverty and superstition. Her mother, Yvette, was a practitioner of voodoo, while her father, Jean-Paul, was a charming con artist who drifted in and out of their lives. From an early age, Celeste learned the art of reading people, picking up on subtle cues and body language that would later serve her well in her chosen profession. As a child, Celeste was often left to her own devices, spending hours exploring the bayou and listening to the stories of local elders. She was particularly drawn to tales of the supernatural, soaking up every bit of folklore and mysticism she could find. It was during this time that she first claimed to have visions, describing vivid dreams that seemed to predict future events. As she entered her teenage years, Celeste's natural beauty and newfound abilities made her the talk of the town. She began to hold seances for her classmates, charging small fees for her services. It was during one of these sessions that she met Thomas, a charismatic drifter who recognized her talent for deception. Together, they embarked on a series of small-time cons across the South, posing as faith healers and fortune-tellers. Their partnership, both romantic and professional, lasted for several years until a scam went wrong. Thomas was arrested, but Celeste managed to evade the authorities. It was then that she decided to reinvent herself, dyeing her hair and adopting the persona of Madame Celeste, the mysterious psychic from Europe. With her new identity, Celeste moved from town to town, honing her craft and building a reputation. She learned to cold read, to manipulate emotions, and to exploit the grief and desperation of her clients. Her cons grew more elaborate, and her fees more exorbitant. It was in Aviara Cove that Madame Celeste set up her most ambitious operation yet. Little did she know that her pursuit of true supernatural power would lead her down a path of no return, culminating in a crime that would shake the foundations of her carefully constructed world. Robert and Elizabeth Morin were the epitome of old money and social grace. Their sprawling estate on the outskirts of Aviara Cove was a testament to generations of wealth accumulated through shrewd investments and inherited fortune. Robert, in his early 60s, had made a name for himself in the world of finance, while Elizabeth was known for her philanthropic efforts and impeccable taste. The Morins had moved to Aviara Cove 5 years ago, seeking a quieter life away from the bustle of New York City. They quickly became pillars of the community, hosting lavish charity galas and contributing generously to local causes. Their fairy tale romance and seemingly perfect life were the envy of many in town. However, beneath the polished exterior lay a web of secrets and unfulfilled desires. Robert, despite his business acumen, harbored a deep-seated fear of losing everything he had worked for. This paranoia led him to make increasingly risky investments, seeking to multiply his wealth to ensure his legacy. Elizabeth, on the other hand, struggled with the loss of her twin sister in a car accident years ago, an event that left her with a profound sense of guilt and a desperate need for closure. It was Elizabeth who first heard of Madame Celeste through the town's gossip mill. Initially skeptical, she found herself drawn to the idea of communicating with her lost sister. Robert, ever the pragmatist, dismissed the notion of psychics and mediums as nonsense, but as he watched his wife sink deeper into melancholy, he reluctantly agreed to accompany her to a session with the renowned psychic. The Morins' decision to seek out Madame Celeste would prove to be fateful. Their wealth, combined with their emotional vulnerabilities, made them the perfect marks for the cunning psychic. As they made there for their first appointment, neither Robert nor Elizabeth could have imagined the dark turn their lives were about to take. They were about to step into a world where their deepest fears and most fervent hopes would be used against them, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in bloodshed and horror. The first meeting between Madame Celeste and the Morins took place on a crisp autumn evening. As the couple entered the dimly lit parlor, they were immediately enveloped by the heady scent of incense and the soft glow of candles. Madame Celeste, resplendent in a deep purple gown adorned with silver stars, greeted them with a knowing smile that seemed to pierce their very souls. Elizabeth, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and trepidation, spoke first. "Madame Celeste, I've heard so much about you and we hope you can help us." The psychic's gaze lingered on Elizabeth, noting the slight tremor in her voice and the way she clutched her husband's arm. Without missing a beat, Madame Celeste responded, "The spirits have been expecting you, my dear. I sense a great loss in your past, a piece of yourself torn away." Elizabeth gasped, her grip on Robert tightening. Robert, meanwhile, remained stoic, his skepticism evident in the tight set of his jaw. Madame Celeste turned her attention to him, her voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "And you, sir, carry the weight of many responsibilities. The future weighs heavily on your mind." Over the next hour, Madame Celeste wove a tapestry of half-truths and educated guesses, expertly reading the couple's reactions and tailoring her revelations to their responses. She spoke of Elizabeth's sister, describing her with just enough accuracy to be convincing, and hinted at messages from beyond the veil. For Robert, she alluded to business opportunities and potential pitfalls, her vague prophecies playing into his financial anxieties. By the end of the session, Elizabeth was in tears, feeling a connection to her lost sister that she hadn't experienced in years. Even Robert, despite his initial skepticism, found himself unsettled by the accuracy of some of Madame Celeste's insights. As they left, both agreed to return for further consultations. Over the next few weeks, the Morans became regular visitors. Madame Celeste carefully cultivated their trust, each session revealing just enough to keep them coming back for more. She began to suggest more elaborate rituals and expensive offerings to enhance their connection to the spirit world. For Elizabeth, these sessions became a lifeline, a way to assuage her guilt and find peace. Robert, while still harboring doubts, couldn't deny the positive change in his wife's demeanor. Slowly but surely, Madame Celeste was weaving her web around the wealthy couple, drawing them deeper into her world of shadows and secrets. Little did the Morans know that with each visit, they were inching closer to a fate far darker than they could have ever imagined. Madame Celeste's demands became more extravagant with each passing day. She insisted on rare crystals and precious metals for energy focus, exotic herbs and incense for purification, and even suggested that the Morans donate significant sums to various charitable causes to curry favor with the spirits. In reality, these donations were funneled into offshore accounts controlled by Celeste herself. The psychic's manipulation extended beyond mere financial exploitation. She began to insinuate herself into every aspect of the Morans' lives. Late-night phone calls became common, with Celeste claiming to have urgent messages from the beyond. She advised Robert on business decisions, conveniently aligning her visions with her own financial interests. For Elizabeth, she became a confidant, slowly isolating her from friends and family under the guise of spiritual protection. As her influence grew, so did Madame Celeste's obsession with the occult. The rituals she performed for the Morans became darker, incorporating elements of blood magic and sacrificial rites. She spoke of ancient powers and forbidden knowledge, her eyes gleaming with a fervor that bordered on madness. The Morans, too deep in her thrall to see the danger, followed her lead without question. Behind closed doors, Celeste pored over arcane texts, convinced that she was on the brink of unlocking true supernatural power. Her sessions with other clients became perfunctory, her focus entirely on the Morans and the potential they represented. In her twisted mind, their wealth and willingness to follow her every command made them the perfect vessels for a grand ritual she was planning. As her plans took shape, Madame Celeste began to lay the groundwork for her ultimate con. She spoke to the Morans of a great awakening that would require them to sever all ties with their old life. Under her guidance, they began to liquidate assets and make preparations to transfer large sums of money. Robert, his business acumen clouded by Celeste's influence, failed to see the red flags that would have been obvious in any other circumstance. Elizabeth, lost in her grief in the promise of eternal connection with her sister, was willing to go to any lengths Madame Celeste suggested. The stage was set for a tragedy of epic proportions. Madame Celeste, her grip on reality slipping with each passing day, had convinced herself that the murder of the Morans would be the key to unlocking limitless power. She meticulously planned every detail, from the ritual site to the method of disposing of the bodies. As the night of the Great Awakening approached, an air of anticipation settled. The Morans, unaware of the fate that awaited them, prepared for what they believed would be a spiritual rebirth. At precisely midnight, the Morans arrived, dressed in the white robes Celeste had provided. Their eyes shone with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they followed the psychic through the house and into the backyard. Robert clutched a briefcase containing documents for the transfer of their wealth, a necessary step for spiritual unburdening, as Celeste had explained. As they entered the clearing, Elizabeth gasped at the elaborate setup. A large pentagram had been drawn on the ground with what appeared to be ash, surrounded by flickering candles and strange symbols. At its center stood the altar, adorned with crystals, feathers, and a large silver chalice. Madame Celeste began the ritual, her voice rising and falling in a hypnotic chant. The words, a mix of Latin and gibberish, washed over the Morans, lulling them into a trance-like state. As the chanting intensified, Celeste instructed the couple to lie down within the pentagram, their heads toward the altar. With practiced movements, she bound their wrists and ankles with silk cords, explaining that it was to anchor their spirits during the transition. The Morans offered no resistance, their minds clouded by the intoxicating blend of incense and blind faith. As the ritual reached its climax, Madame Celeste's demeanor changed. The mask of the benevolent spiritual guide slipped away, revealing the cold, calculating eyes of a killer. From beneath the altar, she retrieved an ornate dagger, its blade glinting in the moonlight. Elizabeth was the first to realize something was terribly wrong. She began to struggle against her bonds, her voice rising in panic. Robert, shaken from his stupor by his wife's cries, demanded to know what was happening, but it was too late. With swift, brutal efficiency, Madame Celeste plunged the dagger into Elizabeth's chest. The woman's scream was cut short as blood bubbled from her lips. Robert roared in anguish and fury, thrashing wildly against his restraints. Celeste turned to him, her face spattered with his wife's blood, and brought the dagger down again and again. In the ensuing silence, broken only by the gurgling of the dying couple, Madame Celeste began to collect their blood in the silver chalice. Her movements were methodical, almost reverent, as she muttered incantations under her breath. She truly believed that this act of supreme sacrifice would grant her the power she had long sought. As life ebbed from the Morans, Madame Celeste completed her grisly task. She dipped her fingers in the blood-filled chalice and began to draw symbols on her own skin, her eyes wild with a terrible ecstasy. In her madness, she failed to notice the faint sound of sirens in the distance. The ritual concluded. Celeste stood over the bodies of her victims, arms outstretched, waiting for the rush of power she was certain would come. But as the minutes ticked by, all she felt was a growing sense of panic and the cold realization of what she had done. With trembling hands, she began the process of cleaning up the crime scene. She had planned for this, but the reality of disposing of two bodies was far more daunting than she had anticipated. As she dragged the corpses towards a pre-dug grave deeper in the woods, her mind raced with plans to secure the Morans' wealth and flee Aviara Cove. In the pale light of dawn, Madame Celeste surveyed the scene of her gruesome crime. The once pristine clearing was now a tableau of horror, with blood-soaked earth and the lingering stench of death. She had managed to bury the bodies of Robert and Elizabeth Moran in the deep grave she had prepared, but evidence of the murder still littered the area. With a growing sense of panic, Celeste began the painstaking process of erasing all traces of the night's events. She gathered the blood-stained robes, the ritual implements, and the now empty chalice, stuffing them into heavy garbage bags. The pentagram was scuffed out, leaves and branches scattered over the disturbed earth. As she worked, Celeste's mind raced. She needed to establish an alibi, to create a narrative that would explain the Morans' sudden disappearance. Rushing back to the house, she showered, scrubbing away every speck of blood and dirt. She then set about creating a paper trail, forging emails and documents that suggested the couple had been planning a secret getaway. Using the information she had gleaned from her sessions with the Morans, Celeste began the complex process of accessing their accounts. She had coerced them into sharing passwords and account details under the guise of spiritual unburdening. Now, those same details would allow her to siphon off their considerable wealth. As morning turned to afternoon, Celeste made a series of calls. To the Morans' housekeeper, she explained that the couple had left for an emergency business trip. To their few close friends, she expressed concern that she hadn't heard from them since their last session. She even went so far as to call the local police, reporting that the Morans had missed an important appointment and weren't answering their phones. But even as she wove her web of lies, Celeste could feel it all unraveling. The hasty cleanup of the crime scene, the rushed cover-up, it all felt inadequate. She hadn't anticipated the overwhelming guilt and fear that now consumed her. Every car that drove past the house, every unexpected noise made her jump. As evening approached, a knock at the door sent Celeste into a panic. It was Detective Malika Collins, responding to the missing persons report Celeste herself had filed. The psychic invited her in, forcing a calm demeanor as she recounted her concerns about the Morans. Detective Collins listened intently, her keen eyes taking in every detail of Celeste's home and behavior. She asked pointed questions about the couple's last known whereabouts and their relationship with Celeste. Though the psychic maintained her composure, she could sense the detective's suspicion. As Collins left, promising to keep Celeste informed of any developments, the full weight of what she had done came crashing down on the self-proclaimed psychic. She realized that her pursuit of power and wealth had led her down a path from which there was no return. The once confident Madame Celeste was now a woman on the edge, waiting for the inevitable moment when her crimes would be discovered. Detective Malika Collins had been with the Aviara Cove Police Department for 15 years, and something about the Moran disappearance case didn't sit right with her from the start. Her instincts, honed by years on the force, told her that Madame Celeste knew more than she was letting on. In the days following her initial visit, Collins dove deep into the investigation. She interviewed the Morans' friends, colleagues, and household staff. A pattern quickly emerged. In the months leading up to their disappearance, the couple had become increasingly isolated, their behavior erratic and secretive. Collins's attention focused on their connection to Madame Celeste. She discovered that large sums of money had been flowing from the Morans' accounts to various shell companies and offshore banks. When she traced these transactions, she found a complex web of financial maneuvers that all seemed to lead back to the psychic. Intrigued by Celeste's background, Collins began to dig into her past. She uncovered a trail of complaints and suspicions spanning several states, all related to psychic fraud and con artistry. The detective realized she was dealing with a sophisticated criminal, one who had managed to stay one step ahead of the law for years. As Collins delved deeper, she started interviewing Celeste's other clients. Many spoke of the psychic with reverence, but a few shared stories of feeling manipulated and pressured to part with large sums of money. One client, an elderly widow, tearfully recounted how Celeste had tried to convince her to sell her home and invest the proceeds in a spiritual cleansing ritual. The detective's suspicions grew when forensic analysis of the Morans' computer revealed deleted emails discussing a Great Awakening ritual with Madame Celeste. The language used was cryptic, but it was clear that the couple had been planning something significant for the night they vanished. Armed with this information, Collins obtained a warrant to search her property. As her team combed through Celeste's home and the woods behind it, the detective couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something terrible. Little did she know that buried deep in those woods lay the gruesome truth of what had really happened to Robert and Elizabeth Moran. The search of Madame Celeste's property yielded a treasure trove of evidence. Hidden in a false bottom of her antique writing desk, detectives discovered a journal detailing her deepening obsession with the occult and her plans for the Morans. The basement revealed a makeshift laboratory where she had been experimenting with various hallucinogenic compounds, likely used to enhance her clients' spiritual experiences. But it was the discovery in the woods that broke the case wide open. A cadaver dog, brought in to search the expansive property, alerted to a spot deep in the forest. As police excavated the area, they unearthed the badly decomposed bodies of Robert and Elizabeth Moran. Detective Collins, watching as the bodies were exhumed, felt a mix of vindication and horror. Her instincts had been right, but the truth was far more gruesome than she had imagined. Forensic analysis would later reveal traces of the ritual, including remnants of candle wax and unfamiliar herbs on the victim's remains. With this damning evidence in hand, Collins moved to arrest Madame Celeste, but the psychic, perhaps foreseeing the net closing around her, had fled. As the search for Celeste continued, Collins pieced together the full extent of her crimes. Financial records showed that she had managed to transfer millions from the Morans' accounts in the days following their murder. Interviews with other clients revealed a pattern of exploitation going back years. The detective also uncovered Celeste's true identity as Celeste Dupont, connecting her to unsolved cases of fraud and theft across multiple states. It became clear that the Moran murders were the culmination of a lifetime of increasingly bold and dangerous cons. Law enforcement tracked Celeste to a remote cabin in the Adirondacks. As police surrounded the property, Celeste attempted to flee into the woods. In a tense standoff, Collins confronted the self-proclaimed psychic, who was now a shell of her former confident self. Madame Celeste or Celeste Dupont, your crimes have caught up with you, Collins called out. There's nowhere left to run. For a moment it seemed Celeste might try to fight or flee, but then, as if all the fight had left her at once, she sank to her knees in the damp forest floor. As Collins approached to make the arrest, Celeste looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of defeat and something else, a lingering madness that sent chills down the detective's spine. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, from financial records showing the systematic draining of the Morans' accounts to the chilling contents of Celeste's personal journals. Forensic experts detailed the brutal nature of the murders, while psychologists attempted to unravel the defendant's complex psyche. Perhaps the most damning testimony came from Thomas, Celeste's former partner. He provided insight into her early cons and the evolution of her tactics, painting a picture of a woman whose greed and delusions of grandeur had spiraled out of control. Celeste's defense team attempted to argue that she was not of sound mind, presenting evidence of her deep-seated belief in the occult and her conviction that the murders were part of a genuine ritual. They portrayed her as a victim of her own delusions, manipulated by the very forces she thought she was channeling. But as the trial progressed, it became clear that Celeste's apparent madness was intertwined with a calculating intelligence. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. The judge, citing the heinous nature of the crimes and Celeste's lack of genuine remorse, sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the quiet town of Riverwood, the Matthews family was well known and well liked. John Matthews, a charismatic businessman, his wife Jane, a dedicated nurse, and Jane's teenage daughter Ava painted a picture of suburban bliss. However, behind closed doors, shadows of deceit and betrayal lurked. One fateful night, Ava was found dead in her bedroom and the town's illusion of peace shattered. Detective David Hunter, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the toughest cases, was called to the scene. As he surveyed the Matthews home, he could sense the undercurrent of tension. The initial reports pointed towards a domestic dispute gone tragically wrong, but Hunter's instincts told him there was more to this story. Jane was found crumpled on the floor, wailing inconsolably as she clung to her daughter's lifeless body. John's face was a mask of shock and grief, but something about his demeanor struck Hunter as off. In the days that followed, the investigation would unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and ultimately murder. Detective Hunter arrived at the Matthews residence on a chilly autumn evening. The house, a modest two-story home with a well-manicured lawn, stood eerily silent. Inside, the once warm and inviting living room was now a flurry of activity, with uniformed officers and forensic technicians meticulously combing through the scene. Ava's room was at the end of a narrow hallway on the second floor. The door was ajar, and a pool of blood stained the beige carpet just inside the threshold. Ava lay sprawled on her bed, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her throat had been slashed, a brutal end to a young life filled with promise. Hunter's gaze moved around the room, noting the signs of a struggle. The nightstand was overturned, and a lamp lay shattered on the floor. He turned to the forensic officer. "What have we got?" The officer, a young woman named Carla, responded, "It's a mess. No signs of forced entry, and no murder weapon yet." Looks like she fought back, though. Downstairs, Jane Matthews sat on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. John hovered nearby, his arm around her shoulders. Jane's eyes were hollow, and she clung to John as if he were a lifeline. Hunter approached them, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Matthews, can you tell me what happened?" Jane's voice trembled as she spoke. "I came home from work and found her like this. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. How could this happen?" John tightened his grip on her shoulder, his face a mixture of sorrow and anger. "We're going to find out who did this, Jane. I promise." Hunter studied John's face, noting the intensity in his eyes. He turned to his partner, Officer Johnson, who was taking notes nearby. "Get statements from the neighbors. See if anyone saw or heard anything unusual." As the investigation continued into the night, Hunter's mind raced with questions. Who could have wanted Ava dead? Was it a random act of violence or something more personal? The answers would come, but not without unearthing the dark secrets that lay hidden within the Matthews family. The Matthews family had lived in Riverwood for over a decade. John Matthews, a successful entrepreneur, owned a small chain of hardware stores. His business acumen and charm made him a respected figure in the community. Jane, his wife, was a nurse at the local hospital, known for her kindness and dedication. Ava, Jane's daughter from a previous marriage, was a bright and outgoing teenager, excelling in both academics and extracurricular activities. John and Jane's marriage appeared strong from the outside. They were often seen at community events, always together, always smiling. But behind the facade, their relationship was strained. John was often away on business trips, and Jane's demanding job left little time for family. Ava, caught in the middle, struggled with feelings of abandonment and longing for a stable family life. Ava's relationship with John was complicated. She admired his success and charm, but resented his frequent absences and the way he seemed to dominate her mother's attention. Their interactions were often tense, with Ava pushing back against John's authority. Despite this, she confided in her friends that she wished she could have a closer bond with him. Jane's love for Ava was undeniable, but their relationship was not without its challenges. As Ava entered her teenage years, the typical mother-daughter conflicts arose, exacerbated by Jane's long hours at work. Despite their disagreements, Jane was fiercely protective of Ava, always striving to provide her with the best opportunities. The Matthews neighbors, the Carters, were a significant presence in their lives. Lisa Carter, a vibrant woman with a magnetic personality, often visited Jane. The two women had become close friends, bonding over shared interests and the challenges of raising teenagers. Lisa's husband, Mark, a quiet and reserved man, worked as an accountant and kept mostly to himself. Unbeknownst to Jane, John and Lisa's friendship had crossed boundaries. Their affair began innocently enough, with casual conversations and shared drinks. But as John's discontent with his marriage grew, so did his attraction to Lisa. They found solace in each other's company, their clandestine meetings becoming more frequent and more intense. Ava, perceptive and curious, noticed the subtle changes. She saw the stolen glances, the hushed conversations, and the lingering touches. One evening, she followed John to the Carters' house, witnessing the undeniable proof of their affair. Shocked and betrayed, Ava confronted John, demanding he end the affair and tell Jane the truth. John's reaction was swift and violent. Fearful of his secret being exposed, he lashed out at Ava, threatening her to keep quiet. Ava, determined to protect her mother, refused to back down. The tension between them escalated, culminating in the tragic events of that fateful night. The Matthews' seemingly perfect life was built on a foundation of lies and deceit. As Detective Hunter delved deeper into their history, he began to see the cracks in their facade. The truth, he knew, was buried beneath layers of betrayal and anger. It was up to him to uncover it and bring justice to Ava. Detective David Hunter was known for his tenacity and keen instincts. With over 2 decades of experience, he had seen it all, from petty thefts to gruesome homicides. As he stood in the Matthews' living room, he felt the familiar rush of determination. This case was personal. He could feel the weight of it bearing down on him. Hunter began his investigation by interviewing the Matthews neighbors. The Carters were first on his list. Lisa Carter, visibly shaken, recounted her interactions with the Matthews, emphasizing her close friendship with Jane. Mark Carter, on the other hand, seemed distant and evasive, his eyes darting around nervously as he spoke. Lisa admitted that she had seen John more often recently, but she attributed it to their shared social circles. Mark, when pressed, mentioned hearing arguments from the Matthews house but couldn't provide specific details. Hunter noted the inconsistencies in their statements, his suspicion growing. Back at the precinct, Hunter and his partner, Officer Johnson, reviewed the evidence collected from the crime scene. The lack of forced entry suggested that Ava knew her attacker. The struggle indicated she fought back, which meant the killer likely bore defensive wounds. Hunter decided to focus on the Matthews family dynamics. He arranged an interview with Jane, hoping to gain more insight into her relationship with Ava and John. Jane, still reeling from the shock, struggled to articulate her thoughts. She described Ava as a loving but headstrong teenager, often clashing with John over trivial matters. "Did you notice any changes in John's behavior recently?" Hunter asked, leaning forward. Jane hesitated, then nodded. He seemed more distant, more stressed. "I thought it was work-related. He was traveling a lot, and we hardly had time together." Hunter's mind raced. The frequent business trips could be a cover for something else. He needed more information about John's activities and interactions outside the family. The next day, Hunter visited John's office. His colleagues painted a picture of a dedicated but increasingly irritable man. They mentioned his frequent absences and whispered about a possible affair, though no one could provide concrete evidence. Hunter's next stop was the local coffee shop, a popular spot for the neighborhood gossip mill. The barista, a young woman with a penchant for eavesdropping, confirmed seeing John with Lisa Carter on multiple occasions. They seemed close, too close for just friends, she said, smirking. As pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Hunter's suspicion of John grew. He needed to find solid proof of the affair and connect it to Ava's murder. He decided to confront John directly, hoping to catch him off guard. John, seated in the interrogation room, maintained his composure. He denied any involvement in Ava's death, insisting that he was as devastated as Jane. Hunter pressed him about the affair, watching for any signs of guilt. John's facade cracked slightly. He admitted to spending time with Lisa, but insisted it was innocent. Hunter wasn't convinced. He could sense that John was hiding something, and he was determined to uncover the truth. As the investigation progressed, Hunter faced mounting pressure to close the case. The community was on edge and the media was relentless, but he knew that rushing to judgment could lead to a miscarriage of justice. He needed to stay focused and methodical, following the evidence wherever it led. Hunter's gut told him that the key to solving the case lay in understanding the true nature of the Matthews family dynamics and the hidden relationships that had turned their lives upside down. He was prepared to dig deep, no matter how uncomfortable the truths he uncovered might be. Jane Matthews sat across from Detective Hunter, her eyes red from days of weeping. She clutched a tissue, twisting it nervously in her hands. The grief and shock of Ava's murder had taken a visible toll on her, but there was a steely determination in her gaze. "Detective Hunter, I need you to understand. I loved my daughter more than anything," she began, her voice trembling. "We had our arguments, yes, but what mother and teenage daughter don't? She was everything to me." Hunter nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Tell me about the night Ava was killed. Where were you and what did you do?" "I was at the hospital, working a double shift. One of the nurses called in sick, and I had to cover for her. I left the house around 6 p.m. and didn't get back until after midnight. When I walked in and found Ava," Jane's voice broke, and she took a moment to compose herself. "Did you notice anything unusual when you came home?" Hunter asked gently. Jane shook her head. "No, everything seemed normal. The door was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. I went straight to Ava's room to check on her, and that's when I found her." Hunter leaned back, considering her words. Jane's alibi seemed solid, and her genuine grief was evident. But there was still the matter of her relationship with Ava, and the tension that had been brewing in their household. "Jane, I've spoken with some of your neighbors and colleagues. They mentioned that Ava and John didn't always get along. Can you tell me more about that?" Jane sighed, wiping away fresh tears. "John tried to be a good stepfather, but Ava resented him. She felt like he was trying to replace her father. They argued often, especially about his long absences and his strict rules." "And what about you and John? How was your relationship?" Hunter probed. "We've had our ups and downs," Jane admitted. "Lately, things have been strained. He was distant, always busy with work. I suspected something was wrong, but I never imagined it would lead to this." As Jane spoke, Hunter noted the raw honesty in her words. She was a mother grieving her child, a wife grappling with the unraveling of her marriage. Despite the initial suspicion, Hunter began to believe that Jane was not involved in Ava's death. But if she wasn't the killer, then who was? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but there were still gaps. Hunter needed to dig deeper, to uncover the hidden truths that would lead him to Ava's murderer. The answer, he felt, was closer than he had initially thought. As Detective Hunter dug deeper into the Matthews family dynamics, his suspicions about John grew stronger. The rumors of an affair with Lisa Carter had to be verified, and Hunter knew that uncovering this relationship could be the key to solving Ava's murder. Hunter decided to pay another visit to Lisa Carter. She was in her garden, pruning rose bushes when he approached. Her demeanor was calm, but Hunter could see the tension in her eyes. "Lisa, I need to ask you some more questions about your relationship with John Matthews," he began. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she set down the pruning shears. "What do you want to know?" Hunter pressed on. "There have been rumors that you and John were more than just friends. I need to know if there's any truth to that." Lisa's face paled and she looked away, struggling to find her words. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Yes, it's true. John and I, We had an affair. It started about a year ago. We were both unhappy in our marriages, and we found comfort in each other. Hunter nodded, noting her admission. Did Ava know about the affair? Lisa's eyes widened in shock. How did you know? Hunter leaned in, his voice firm. It's important, Lisa. Did Ava know? Lisa nodded slowly. Yes, she found out a few weeks ago. She saw us together and confronted John. She was furious, threatened to tell Jane. John begged her not to, but she wouldn't listen. Hunter felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were falling into place. What happened after Ava confronted John? Lisa hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. John was frantic. He tried to reason with Ava, but she was adamant. They argued a lot after that. He told me he was scared of what Ava might do, that she could destroy both our families. Hunter thanked Lisa for her honesty and made his way back to the precinct. He reviewed the evidence once more, focusing on John's behavior and movements. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that John had something to do with Ava's murder. Hunter decided it was time to confront John with the new information. He called John into the station for another interview, hoping to catch him off guard. As John sat across from him, Hunter could see the tension in his eyes. John, I've spoken with Lisa Carter. She confirmed your affair. Hunter began, watching John's reaction closely. John's face tightened, but he remained silent. Hunter continued. Ava found out about the affair, didn't she? She confronted you and threatened to tell Jane. John's composure cracked. He leaned forward, his voice shaking. Yes, she found out, but I didn't kill her. I loved her like my own daughter. She was angry, but I would never hurt her. Hunter pressed on, his voice relentless. You were afraid of what she might do. You knew she could ruin everything. What happened that night, John? John's eyes filled with tears, and he buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean to hurt her. We argued, she pushed me, and I pushed back. She fell, and there was blood. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Hunter felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The truth was finally coming out. John, you need to tell me everything. We need to know exactly what happened. John took a deep breath and began to recount the events of that night. Ava had confronted him again, demanding that he end the affair and tell Jane the truth. Their argument escalated, and in a moment of rage and fear, John lashed out. Ava fell, hitting her head on the nightstand. Seeing her lifeless body, John realized the gravity of what he had done. I didn't mean to kill her, John repeated, his voice breaking. I just wanted to stop her from destroying our lives. Hunter listened, his heart heavy with the weight of John's confession. Ava's death was a tragic result of a web of lies and betrayals. The truth was finally out, but the pain and loss it caused could never be undone. Hunter knew that John would face justice for his actions, but the real challenge would be helping Jane and the rest of the community heal from this devastating ordeal. The truth had been uncovered, but its consequences would ripple through their lives for years to come. Detective Hunter left the interrogation room, the weight of John's confession heavy on his shoulders. The case had taken a toll on everyone involved, but he felt a sense of grim satisfaction, knowing that the truth was finally out. Ava's death was no longer a mystery, and her killer would face justice. Hunter returned to his office and began to piece together the final report. He reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and John's confession, ensuring that everything was in order. As he worked, he couldn't help but reflect on the twists and turns of the investigation. He thought back to the initial days when Jane had been the prime suspect. Her grief-stricken state and the strained relationship with Ava had made her an easy target for suspicion. But as he delved deeper, he realized that Jane's love for her daughter, despite their conflicts, was genuine and unwavering. John was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict brought a sense of closure, but it was bittersweet. The community mourned Ava's loss, and the once respected John Matthews was now a pariah, his reputation irrevocably tarnished. In the end, the story of Ava Matthews was one of sorrow, but also of resilience and hope. It highlighted the fragile nature of human relationships and the profound impact of truth and justice. For Detective Hunter and the people of Riverwood, it was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, even in the face of life's darkest moments. One early autumn morning, the lifeless body of Melissa Porter was discovered in her car, parked on a secluded road just outside town. Melissa, a local kindergarten teacher beloved by many, had gone missing 2 days prior, leaving behind a worried husband and a community in shock. James Porter, Melissa's husband, was the first to report her missing. James, a mild-mannered accountant, had been frantic with worry, his anxiety evident in the tremor of his voice when he spoke to the police. The discovery of Melissa's body turned his worst fears into a nightmarish reality. Alongside James, 2 other men, Michael Reynolds and Joe Clark, soon came under the scrutiny of the investigation. Both had been intimately involved with Melissa, each harboring deep and complex feelings for her. Detective Sarah Davis, a seasoned investigator with a sharp mind and an unyielding determination for justice, was assigned to the case. As she delved into Melissa's life and the relationships that entwined her with James, Michael, and Joe, it became clear that beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case lay a labyrinth of secrets and betrayals. The story of Melissa Porter's demise was not just a tale of a tragic death, but of a tangled web of love, deceit, and vengeance. It was a crisp morning when Officer Tom Harris received a call about an abandoned vehicle on the outskirts of Oakwood. As he approached the scene, the sight of Melissa Porter's car sent a chill down his spine. The car was parked haphazardly, one wheel on the gravel shoulder, the other on the grassy verge. The windows were fogged, and the faintest hint of a foul odor wafted through the air. Harris peered through the driver's window and recoiled. Melissa Porter was slumped over the steering wheel. Her skin was pallid, and a faint trickle of blood had dried on her temple. The immediate cause of death was not apparent, but the scene suggested foul play. The small community of Oakwood buzzed with shock and sorrow as news of the discovery spread. Melissa had been missing for 48 hours, and her friends and family had clung to hope that she would return unharmed. Now that hope was cruelly dashed. James Porter was inconsolable, his grief magnified by the public scrutiny he now faced. He had been the one to report Melissa missing, and now he was thrust into the center of a murder investigation. Detective Sarah Davis arrived at the scene, her expression grim. She meticulously inspected the car and the surrounding area, noting the lack of defensive wounds on Melissa's body and the absence of a struggle. This suggested she might have been unconscious or incapacitated before her death. A preliminary examination revealed traces of a powdery substance on the passenger seat, which would later be identified as a potent sedative. Davis ordered the car to be towed to the forensic lab for a thorough examination and instructed her team to canvass the area for witnesses. The investigation had just begun, but the pressure to find answers was immense. The community wanted justice for Melissa, and the police were determined to provide it. The Oakwood Police Department quickly mobilized to investigate Melissa Porter's death. Detective Davis spearheaded the effort, her no-nonsense attitude setting the tone for the team. The first order of business was to question James Porter, whose proximity to the victim made him an initial person of interest. James was brought in for questioning at the station. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Detective Davis began with routine questions about his relationship with Melissa, their recent activities, and his whereabouts during the time she was missing. James explained that he and Melissa had been married for 5 years, a seemingly happy couple in the eyes of the community. He recounted the night Melissa disappeared. She had left the house around 7 p.m., claiming she needed to run some errands. When she didn't return, he grew worried and called the police the next morning. Davis noted his demeanor, searching for signs of deception. James provided an alibi, stating he was home watching TV that night. He offered to let the police verify his story with their home security system's footage. Davis made a mental note to follow up on this lead. As the interview progressed, another name surfaced: Michael Reynolds. According to James, Michael was a close friend of Melissa's, someone she had known for years. James admitted he had always felt a bit uneasy about their relationship, but had no concrete reason to suspect anything untoward. Detective Davis decided to pay Michael a visit. Michael Reynolds, a tall man in his early 30s with an air of easy confidence, welcomed the detectives into his home. He seemed genuinely distraught upon hearing of Melissa's death, insisting they had been just friends. However, his nervous fidgeting suggested there might be more to the story. The investigation widened to include Joe Clark, a local artist who had been seen with Melissa on numerous occasions. Joe, in his mid-40s, was known for his brooding temperament and reclusive lifestyle. He was less forthcoming than Michael, evading direct questions and offering vague, cryptic responses. Detective Davis sensed that both Michael and Joe were hiding something. The threads of Melissa's life began to unravel, revealing a woman who was far more complex and enigmatic than anyone had realized. With each interview, the investigation grew more convoluted, and the stakes became higher. The truth about Melissa's death was buried beneath layers of secrets, and it was up to Davis to dig them out. Melissa Porter was born and raised in Oakwood, a town she loved and never wanted to leave. She was known for her warm smile and her ability to connect with people, traits that made her an excellent kindergarten teacher. Her marriage to James was seen as a match made in heaven, though those closest to her knew there was more beneath the surface. Melissa met James at a charity event 5 years ago. James, an accountant with a stable job and a kind heart, seemed like the perfect partner. They married within a year, and for a while their life together appeared idyllic. But over time, Melissa began to feel restless. The routine of married life left her yearning for something more. Enter Michael Reynolds. Michael and Melissa had been friends since high school. Their bond had always been strong, and there were times when their friendship seemed to border on something deeper. Michael, a charming and successful entrepreneur, offered Melissa the excitement and passion she felt was missing from her marriage. Their relationship, while initially platonic, soon evolved into a secret affair. Melissa found herself torn between the security James provided and the thrill she experienced with Michael. Her feelings for Michael were intense, but they also brought complications and guilt. Then there was Joe Clark. Joe was a local artist, known for his moody paintings and reclusive nature. Melissa met Joe at an art exhibition a year before her death. Joe was different from both James and Michael. He was mysterious and brooding, qualities that fascinated Melissa. Their connection was immediate, and it wasn't long before Melissa found herself involved with Joe as well. Melissa's relationships with Michael and Joe were known only to a few close friends, and she took great pains to keep them hidden from James. However, managing these affairs became increasingly difficult, and Melissa's life grew more complicated. She loved each of these men in different ways, and each offered her something unique. But she also knew that this web of love and deceit could not last forever. As Detective Davis delved deeper into Melissa's background, she discovered a woman who was passionate and vibrant but also deeply conflicted. Melissa's need for connection and excitement had led her down a dangerous path, one that ultimately ended in her untimely death. With Melissa's body discovered and her secret life beginning to surface, suspicion naturally fell on James Porter. Detective Davis scrutinized his alibi, seeking any inconsistencies that might indicate his involvement in his wife's death. James's alibi rested on his claim that he was at home the night Melissa disappeared, watching TV and later falling asleep on the couch. The home security footage confirmed that James had not left the house during the critical hours. However, Davis was not entirely convinced. She knew that alibis could be fabricated or manipulated. The state of the Porters' marriage became a focal point of the investigation. Friends and neighbors painted a picture of a couple that appeared happy, but had their share of issues. Financial records showed that the Porters were struggling with debt, a potential motive for James to want his wife out of the picture. Life insurance policies on Melissa further added to the suspicion. Though the amounts were not exorbitant, James's demeanor during questioning was another point of concern. While his grief seemed genuine, there were moments when his responses were too measured, too controlled. Davis wondered if he was hiding something, or simply trying to protect himself from being wrongfully accused. The most damning piece of evidence was a series of text messages exchanged between James and Melissa in the days leading up to her disappearance. The messages revealed growing tension between them, with Melissa expressing dissatisfaction and James responding with frustration. The arguments, though not overtly violent, indicated a marriage under significant strain. James's interactions with Michael and Joe also raised red flags. Both men admitted to having confrontations with James, who had become increasingly suspicious of their relationships with Melissa. James denied any knowledge of Melissa's affairs, but his anger towards the men was palpable. As the investigation progressed, James Porter remained a prime suspect. His potential motives, financial gain, marital discord, and jealousy, provided enough cause for Detective Davis to keep a close watch on him. However, without concrete evidence linking him directly to the crime, the case against him remained circumstantial. Michael Reynolds and Joe Clark, the two men who had shared intimate relationships with Melissa, were next on Detective Davis's list. Each had their own reasons for wanting Melissa in their lives, and potentially, reasons for wanting her gone. Michael Reynolds, with his charismatic demeanor and successful career, seemed an unlikely suspect at first glance. He had been Melissa's confidant for years, their bond evolving into a romantic relationship that brought both joy and complications. Michael's feelings for Melissa were genuine, but his frustration with her indecision and the secrecy of their affair had caused tension. During questioning, Michael admitted to feeling hurt and betrayed when he discovered Melissa's involvement with Joe, but he vehemently denied having anything to do with her death. Joe Clark was a different story. Known for his brooding personality and artistic temperament, Joe had always been somewhat of an enigma. His relationship with Melissa was intense and passionate, but also fraught with jealousy and possessiveness. Joe's art often reflected his tumultuous emotions, and his interactions with Melissa had been no exception. During his interview, Joe was evasive, his answers tinged with bitterness. He expressed deep sorrow over Melissa's death, but also a lingering resentment towards her for being unable to fully commit to him. Davis noted the contrasts between Michael and Joe. One a polished, successful businessman, the other a moody, introspective artist. Both had motives driven by love and jealousy, and both had been deeply affected by Melissa's actions. The detective also discovered that Michael and Joe had confronted each other on several occasions, their arguments escalating as Melissa's relationships with them became more entangled. The investigation into Michael and Joe's backgrounds revealed more layers to Melissa's story. Each man had been drawn to Melissa's vivacious personality and warmth, but both had also experienced the darker sides of their relationships with her. The complexity of these relationships suggested that Melissa's death was not a straightforward case of jealousy or revenge, but rather a culmination of many conflicting emotions and desires. As Detective Davis continued to unravel the intricacies of Melissa's life and relationships, she realized that the truth was buried deep within a web of passion, betrayal, and hidden motives. The challenge was to untangle these threads and find the one that would lead to Melissa's killer. As Detective Davis dug deeper into the lives of Melissa, James, Michael, and Joe, she began to uncover a series of startling revelations and secrets that painted a clearer picture of Melissa's complex world. The first major revelation came from Melissa's close friend, Laura Mitchell. Laura revealed that Melissa had been confiding in her for months about the struggles in her marriage and the turmoil caused by her relationships with Michael and Joe. Melissa had been feeling increasingly trapped and overwhelmed by the dual pressures of maintaining her marriage and managing her affairs. Laura also mentioned that Melissa had expressed fears about someone stalking her, though she never specified who. This new information prompted Davis to re-examine the evidence with fresh eyes. The possibility of a third-party involvement, someone who knew about Melissa's affairs and had a vested interest in her demise, became a compelling angle. Davis ordered a deeper investigation into Melissa's communications and social media, looking for any signs of threats or suspicious activity. The forensic analysis of Melissa's car provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. Traces of the sedative found in the passenger seat matched a prescription registered to Joe Clark. When confronted with this evidence, Joe's calm facade began to crack. He admitted to having the sedative, but claimed he had no intention of harming Melissa. According to Joe, Melissa had asked him for the sedative to help her sleep, a claim that was difficult to verify. Further complicating the investigation was a discovery in Michael's financial records. Large sums of money had been transferred between Michael's accounts and an unknown third party over the past few months. Michael explained that these were business transactions, but the lack of clear documentation raised suspicion. Davis wondered if Michael might have been involved in some form of blackmail or had hired someone to intimidate Melissa. The pressure on all three men intensified as Davis continued to piece together Melissa's last days. Interviews with neighbors and colleagues revealed that Melissa had been planning to leave Oakwood, possibly to escape the tangled relationships she had found herself in. She had been seen packing boxes into her car and had mentioned to a colleague that she needed a fresh start. Then came the biggest revelation of all, a hidden journal found in Melissa's belongings. The journal contained detailed accounts of her relationships with James, Michael, and Joe, as well as her fears and plans for the future. Melissa wrote about feeling suffocated by James's controlling nature, exhilarated by her affair with Michael, and deeply conflicted about her intense connection with Joe. She also mentioned receiving anonymous threats which she suspected were from someone who knew about her affairs. The journal painted a picture of a woman caught in a web of her own making, desperate to break free but unsure how. It provided Detective Davis with critical insights into Melissa's state of mind and the potential motives of those around her. With this new evidence, Davis felt she was finally closing in on the truth. Just as Detective Davis thought she was getting closer to solving the case, a surprising twist emerged that shifted the focus of the investigation. A new piece of evidence surfaced: a security camera recording from a nearby convenience store that showed Melissa in the company of a man who was neither James, Michael, nor Joe on the night she disappeared. The man in the footage was identified as Daniel Harper, a former colleague of Melissa's from a previous job in a neighboring town. Harper had a checkered past, including a history of violent behavior and a restraining order filed against him by a former girlfriend. The discovery of his involvement with Melissa added a new layer of complexity to the case. Davis brought Harper in for questioning. Harper, a wiry man with a nervous energy, initially denied having seen Melissa recently. However, when confronted with the video evidence, he changed his story. He admitted to meeting Melissa that night, but claimed they had only talked. According to Harper, Melissa had reached out to him because she felt threatened and needed someone to confide in. She had asked Harper to meet her away from Oakwood to avoid being seen by anyone who might know her. Harper's account seemed plausible, but Davis was wary. Harper had a motive: his unrequited feelings for Melissa and his jealousy over her relationships with other men. His past behavior suggested he could be capable of violence, especially if he felt rejected or betrayed. Davis decided to dig deeper into Harper's background and his interactions with Melissa. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Harper's car revealed traces of the same sedative found in Melissa's vehicle. This new evidence linked Harper directly to the scene of the crime, making him a prime suspect. Harper's story began to unravel under the weight of mounting evidence. He confessed that he had given Melissa the sedative, but insisted it was for her own protection, claiming she had asked for it to calm her nerves. Detective Davis knew that Harper's involvement complicated the narrative, but she also suspected there was more to the story. Harper's account of events didn't entirely align with the evidence. Davis hypothesized that Harper might have been manipulated by someone else, possibly Michael or Joe, to carry out the crime. The idea of a larger conspiracy began to take shape. As Davis continued to press Harper for details, he revealed a startling detail: he had been receiving anonymous payments over the past few months, just like Michael. Harper claimed he didn't know who was behind the payments, but admitted they were meant to ensure his silence about his meetings with Melissa. This revelation pointed to a coordinated effort to keep Melissa's secrets hidden. Davis realized that the investigation had taken a dark turn, one that involved not just a crime of passion, but a calculated plan to silence Melissa permanently. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fit together, and Davis was determined to uncover the mastermind behind the plot. The investigation took a sinister turn as Detective Davis unraveled the web of deception surrounding Melissa's death. The revelation of anonymous payments and Harper's involvement hinted at a larger, more nefarious plot. Davis now had to consider the possibility that Melissa's death was not just a crime of passion, but a premeditated murder orchestrated by someone with a hidden agenda. Davis's team focused on tracing the source of the payments. Financial records showed a series of transactions funneled through a shell company, eventually leading to an offshore account. The intricate financial trail suggested a high level of planning and resourcefulness, characteristics not typically associated with crimes of passion. This new lead pointed towards someone with significant financial acumen and the means to cover their tracks, potentially Michael Reynolds, given his business background. Davis revisited Michael, armed with the new evidence. Under intense questioning, Michael's confident facade began to crack. He admitted to transferring money to Harper, but insisted it was to help Melissa, not harm her. He claimed Melissa had confided in him about her fears and asked him to arrange for protection, but he had no idea Harper would misuse the funds. Davis was not convinced by Michael's explanation. She suspected that Michael, feeling cornered by Melissa's indecision and the threat of their affair being exposed, had orchestrated a plan to remove her from the equation. However, Michael alone could not have executed such a complex scheme. The involvement of Joe Clark, with his volatile emotions and connection to Melissa, seemed likely. Confronting Joe, Davis presented the evidence of the sedative and the financial transactions. Joe, already unstable, broke down under the pressure. He confessed to being manipulated by Michael, who had convinced him that Melissa was planning to leave both of them and expose their affairs. In a desperate bid to prevent this, Joe agreed to Michael's plan to sedate Melissa and make her disappear. The dark truth emerged. Michael had orchestrated the entire plot, using Joe and Harper as pawns to carry out his plan. Michael's motive was not just jealousy, but a calculated decision to eliminate Melissa and protect his reputation and business interests. Joe, driven by his emotional turmoil, had been an unwitting accomplice, and Harper, lured by money, had played his part without fully understanding the consequences. Davis's investigation had uncovered a chilling conspiracy that highlighted the lengths people would go to protect their secrets and desires. The case was far more complex and darker than anyone had initially imagined, revealing the depths of human deceit and treachery. With the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place, Detective Davis moved swiftly to secure arrest warrants for Michael Reynolds and Joe Clark. The evidence against them was overwhelming: financial transactions, confessions, and the forensic link between the sedative and Joe. Davis coordinated with her team to ensure that the arrests were conducted smoothly and without incident. Joe Clark was the first to be apprehended. He was found at his studio, surrounded by his hauntingly dark paintings. The arresting officers found him in a state of disarray, his guilt and regret evident. Joe offered no resistance, murmuring apologies and asking about Melissa's final moments. His remorse was genuine, but it could not absolve him of his role in the crime. Michael Reynolds proved more challenging. He had anticipated the arrest and attempted to flee. However, a coordinated effort by the Oakwood Police Department ensured he was apprehended at a private airstrip, trying to board a chartered plane. His arrest was marked by defiance and indignation, maintaining his innocence and accusing the police of fabricating evidence. With both suspects in custody, the prosecution began to build a robust case. The trial that followed was one of the most sensational in Oakwood's history, drawing intense media attention. The courtroom was packed with townspeople, journalists, and those who had known Melissa. The prosecution presented a compelling narrative of manipulation, betrayal, and murder, while the defense tried to paint Michael as a victim of circumstance and Joe as a man driven to desperation. The jury deliberated for several days, weighing the extensive evidence and emotional testimonies. Ultimately, both Michael Reynolds and Joe Clark were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder. Michael received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, while Joe, whose genuine remorse and cooperation were considered, was given a reduced sentence of 25 years. Daniel Harper, whose role was more peripheral, was charged with accessory to murder and received a lesser sentence of 10 years. His involvement, though significant, was viewed as being coerced by the primary conspirators. In the end, Oakwood returned to its peaceful existence, but the memory of Melissa Porter and the lessons learned from her case would never be forgotten. Her story remained a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for truth and justice. At the center of this tragic story were three individuals whose lives became inextricably intertwined: Oliver Holbrook, a charismatic local businessman; Taylor Tanner, a devoted elementary school teacher; and Claire Reeves, a newcomer with a mysterious past. Their fates collided in a perfect storm of desire, jealousy, and deceit that would leave two of them dead and the third forever changed. Oliver Holbrook was born and raised in Millbrook, the only child of Robert and Elizabeth Holbrook. From an early age, it was clear that Oliver was destined for success. His father, a prominent local attorney, instilled in him a strong work ethic and an unwavering ambition. His mother, a former beauty queen turned socialite, taught him the art of charm and social grace. Growing up, Oliver excelled in both academics and athletics. He was captain of the high school football team, president of the student council, and valedictorian of his graduating class. After high school, Oliver attended an Ivy League university where he studied business and economics. But there was another side to Oliver Holbrook, one that few people saw. Behind his winning smile and easy charm lay a calculating mind and an insatiable hunger for control. He was a master manipulator, skilled at identifying people's weaknesses and exploiting them for his own gain. In both business and his personal life, Oliver viewed relationships as transactions, always looking for what he could get out of them. Despite his success, Oliver was never satisfied. He craved constant validation and attention, a need that manifested in a string of romantic conquests. He was known as a ladies' man, leaving a trail of broken hearts in his wake. But as he approached his mid-30s, Oliver began to feel the pressure to settle down, at least outwardly. He knew that having a wife would enhance his image as a respectable businessman and pillar of the community. It was with this mindset that Oliver entered into relationships with both Taylor Tanner and Claire Reeves. In Taylor, he saw the perfect candidate for the role of Mrs. Holbrook, attractive, well-liked, and from a good family. Claire, on the other hand, represented excitement and passion, a secret indulgence he had no intention of giving up. Little did Oliver know that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down, set in motion by the very women he thought he could control. Taylor Tanner was the epitome of the girl next door. Born and raised in Millbrook, she was the middle child in a family of 5, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Her parents, Michael and Linda Tanner, were pillars of the community. Her father was the town's beloved family doctor, and her mother was a longtime volunteer at the local animal shelter. Taylor's childhood was marked by warmth and stability. The Tanner household was always bustling with activity, filled with laughter, and the aroma of her mother's home-cooked meals. This nurturing environment shaped Taylor into a compassionate and empathetic young woman, always ready to lend a helping hand or a listening ear to those in need. Upon completing her degree, Taylor secured a position teaching 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary School. It was at a local charity event, organized to raise funds for the school's new library, that Taylor first met Oliver Holbrook. She was immediately drawn to his charisma and confident demeanor. Their courtship was a whirlwind romance that seemed plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. Oliver wooed Taylor with grand gestures, surprise weekend getaways, lavish gifts, and romantic dinners at upscale restaurants. For Taylor, who had always led a relatively simple life, the attention was intoxicating. She fell deeply in love, believing she had found her soulmate. Claire Reeves arrived in Millbrook like a gust of wind, stirring up the quiet town with her mysterious past and alluring presence. Unlike Taylor and Oliver, Claire was an outsider, having grown up in a series of foster homes across the state of New York. Her childhood was marked by instability and loneliness, experiences that shaped her into a complex and often unpredictable adult. Born to a teenage mother who struggled with addiction, Claire was placed in the foster care system at the age of 3. Over the next 15 years, she bounced from one home to another, never staying in one place long enough to form lasting connections. This transient lifestyle left Claire with a deep-seated fear of abandonment and a desperate need for love and acceptance. Despite the challenges of her upbringing, Claire was fiercely intelligent and ambitious. She excelled in school, using her studies as an escape from the chaos of her personal life. Her academic success eventually earned her a scholarship to a prestigious university in New York City, where she studied psychology. After graduation, Claire worked as a marketing executive in Manhattan for several years. She was successful in her career, but her personal life was a series of short-lived, tumultuous relationships. Each failed romance left her feeling more empty and desperate for connection. It was in the wake of a particularly painful breakup that Claire decided to leave the city behind and start fresh. She had inherited a modest sum of money from a former foster mother who had shown her particular kindness, and she used this windfall to buy a small cottage on the outskirts of Millbrook. Claire was drawn to the town's picturesque charm and the promise of a simpler life. Upon her arrival in Millbrook, Claire quickly caught the attention of the locals. Her striking looks and big city sophistication made her stand out in the small town. She found work as a consultant for local businesses, using her marketing expertise to help them expand their reach. It was at one of these consulting jobs that Claire first encountered Oliver Holbrook. The attraction between them was immediate and electric. In Oliver, Claire saw everything she had ever wanted: success, stability, and the promise of love. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to hope for a happy ending. As Claire and Oliver began their clandestine affair, she convinced herself that she had finally found her place in the world. She threw herself into the relationship with the desperation of someone who had never known true belonging. However, Claire's fragile sense of security would soon be shattered by the revelation of Oliver's engagement to Taylor. This betrayal would trigger all of Claire's deepest fears and insecurities, setting in motion a tragic chain of events that would leave an indelible mark on the town of Millbrook. As summer turned to fall in Millbrook, the lives of Oliver, Taylor, and Claire became increasingly entangled in a complex web of desire, deceit, and jealousy. Oliver, ever the skilled manipulator, carefully navigated his relationships with both women, feeding each of them just enough attention and affection to keep them invested. With Taylor, Oliver played the role of the devoted fiancé. He attended local events by her side, charmed her family at Sunday dinners, and made grand plans for their future together. Taylor basked in the glow of their engagement, excitedly sharing details of their upcoming wedding with anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, Oliver's encounters with Claire took place in the shadows. They met in out-of-the-way restaurants in neighboring towns, or at Claire's secluded cottage. During these stolen moments, Oliver showered Claire with the passion and intensity that he carefully held back from Taylor. He fed Claire's hopes with vague promises of a future together, always with the caveat that he needed time to handle things with Taylor. As the weeks passed, tension began to build between Taylor and Claire. Even though Taylor remained unaware of the true nature of Claire's relationship with Oliver, the two women often found themselves at the same local events, with Claire's presence invariably drawing Oliver's attention away from his fiancée. Taylor, trusting and naive, initially tried to befriend Claire. Sensing the newcomer's loneliness, she invited Claire to girls' nights out and community functions, unwittingly providing more opportunities for Oliver and Claire to cross paths. Claire, consumed by her feelings for Oliver and racked with guilt over betraying Taylor's friendly overtures, became increasingly volatile. Her behavior swung between overly solicitous towards Taylor and barely concealed hostility. These mood swings did not go unnoticed by the townspeople, who began to speculate about the source of Claire's apparent instability. Oliver observed the growing friction between the two women, with a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. While he worried about his carefully constructed double life unraveling, he also reveled in the knowledge that two beautiful women were competing for his affections. As autumn progressed, and the date of Oliver and Taylor's wedding drew nearer, the situation became increasingly untenable. Claire's demands for Oliver to leave Taylor grew more frequent and desperate, while Taylor remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. Little did any of them know that their actions over the next few months would shatter the peaceful facade of Millbrook and change their lives forever. On a crisp October morning, the day of Oliver and Taylor's wedding arrived. The entire town of Millbrook seemed to be in attendance, filling the picturesque white church to capacity. Taylor, radiant in a classic white gown, walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her face beaming with joy and love. Oliver stood at the altar, outwardly the picture of a happy groom, but those who knew him well might have noticed a flicker of unease in his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that belied his calm exterior. As he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish Taylor for all eternity, his thoughts couldn't help but stray to Claire. Unbeknownst to the happy couple and their guests, Claire was outside the church, hidden from view but close enough to hear the ceremony. Each word of love and devotion that echoed from within the building was like a dagger to her heart. As the church bells rang out, signaling the completion of the ceremony, Claire felt something inside her snap. The reception that followed was a joyous affair, with the entire town celebrating the union of two of its most beloved residents. Taylor danced and laughed, surrounded by friends and family, while Oliver played his role to perfection, ever the charming and attentive new husband. But as the night wore on and the champagne flowed freely, Oliver found his mask slipping. More than once, Taylor caught him staring off into the distance, a troubled expression on his face. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed off her concerns with a quick smile and a kiss. As the newlyweds drove off to their honeymoon, tin cans rattling behind their car and well wishes ringing in their ears, neither of them could have imagined the dark turn their lives were about to take. For in the shadows, Claire Reeves was already plotting her revenge. In the weeks following Oliver and Taylor's wedding, Claire Reeves spiraled into a pit of despair and obsession. The life she had imagined for herself, a future with Oliver, had been snatched away, leaving her feeling betrayed and discarded. Her fragile psyche, already damaged by years of abandonment and instability, began to fracture under the weight of her grief and anger. At first, Claire tried to move on. She threw herself into her work, taking on more consulting projects than ever before. She attempted to socialize, accepting invitations to local gatherings and community events. But everywhere she went, she was confronted with reminders of Oliver and Taylor's happiness. The newlyweds were the talk of the town, their smiling faces seeming to mock Claire at every turn. As her pain deepened, Claire's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started showing up late to meetings or missing them entirely. Her appearance, once impeccable, grew disheveled. Concerned neighbors reported seeing her wandering the streets late at night, muttering to herself. But it was Claire's growing obsession with Taylor that truly marked her descent into madness. She began stalking the young teacher, following her to and from work, watching her house from a distance. Claire convinced herself that if she could just understand Taylor, figure out what made her so special in Oliver's eyes, she could win him back. Claire's cottage became a shrine to her obsession. Walls were covered with photos of Taylor cut from local newspapers and printouts from social media. She created elaborate timelines and diagrams, trying to piece together every detail of Taylor's life and her relationship with Oliver. As weeks turned into months, Claire's fantasies grew darker. She began to imagine scenarios where Taylor was out of the picture, leaving the path clear for her to reclaim Oliver's affections. At first, these were harmless daydreams, Taylor moving away or realizing she didn't love Oliver after all. But gradually, Claire's thoughts turned to murder. She spent hours researching different methods, weighing the pros and cons of each with a detached, almost clinical precision. She created multiple plans, each more elaborate than the last, always careful to cover her tracks and establish alibis. Throughout this time, Claire maintained sporadic contact with Oliver. Their encounters were brief and increasingly tense, with Claire alternating between desperate pleas for him to leave Taylor and icy accusations of betrayal. Oliver, growing uncomfortable with Claire's intensity, began to distance himself, unaware of the dangerous turn her obsession had taken. As winter settled over Millbrook, Claire's plans began to crystallize. She had chosen her method, a staged hit-and-run accident that would leave no trace of her involvement. In her deluded mind, she had convinced herself that eliminating Taylor was not just for her own benefit, but for Oliver's as well. She truly believed that he was trapped in an unhappy marriage and that she would be liberating him. The night before she planned to carry out her deadly scheme, Claire stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing the wild-eyed woman staring back at her. For a brief moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but then she remembered the sound of wedding bells, the sight of Oliver kissing his bride, and her resolve hardened once more. On a foggy Wednesday morning in February, Taylor Tanner Holbrook left her house for her daily jog, just as she had done countless times before. The streets were quiet, most of Millbrook's residents still tucked away in their warm beds. Taylor, with her bright yellow running jacket and bouncing ponytail, was a spot of color in the gray landscape. Unbeknownst to Taylor, Claire Reeves was waiting, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She sat in a stolen car at the end of a secluded stretch of road, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. As Taylor's form appeared through the mist, Claire took a deep breath and turned the key in the ignition. The next few moments passed in a blur of screeching tires, a muffled scream, and the sickening thud of impact. Claire, operating on autopilot, quickly drove away from the scene, leaving Taylor's crumpled body on the side of the road. It was a jogger who found Taylor an hour later. By then it was too late. Despite the best efforts of paramedics, Taylor was pronounced dead at the scene. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire, leaving the town reeling in shock and grief. In the immediate aftermath, Claire's plan seemed to work perfectly. The police initially treated the incident as a tragic hit-and-run accident. Claire had meticulously planned her alibi, making sure she was seen at a 24-hour diner in a neighboring town both before and after the time of Taylor's death. Oliver, upon hearing the news of his wife's death, put on a convincing display of grief. He wept openly at the funeral, leaning on friends and family for support. To all outward appearances, he was a devastated widower, struggling to come to terms with his loss. But as the initial shock wore off and the investigation deepened, cracks began to appear in the facade. Detective Lisa Montague, assigned to the case, sensed that there was more to Taylor's death than a simple accident. As she dug deeper, she began to uncover the tangled web of relationships that had led to this tragic event. Meanwhile, Claire watched from the sidelines, a mix of guilt and triumph warring within her. She had achieved her goal. Taylor was gone. Now surely Oliver would be hers. But as the days passed and Oliver remained distant, doubt began to creep into her mind. Had she made a terrible mistake? In the weeks following Taylor's death, Millbrook was shrouded in a pall of grief and suspicion. The once friendly neighbors now eyed each other warily, wondering if a killer walked among them. Detective Montague's investigation sent ripples through the community as she interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances of Taylor. Oliver Holbrook maintained his role as the grieving widower, making tearful appearances on local news channels and offering a substantial reward for information leading to the arrest of Taylor's killer. He threw himself into charity work in Taylor's name, establishing a foundation to support local education initiatives. Claire, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her composure. The guilt of her actions weighed heavily on her, manifesting in bouts of insomnia and panic attacks. She obsessively followed the news of the investigation, terrified that each day would bring a knock on her door from the police. As Detective Montague delved deeper into Taylor's life, she began to uncover inconsistencies in Oliver's story. Several witnesses reported seeing him arguing with Taylor in the weeks leading up to her death. Financial records showed large, unexplained withdrawals from their joint account. The detective's attention also turned to Claire. Her erratic behavior in the months prior to Taylor's death had not gone unnoticed, and her sudden calming in the aftermath raised suspicions. When questioned, Claire's alibi seemed airtight, but Montague sensed she was hiding something. As winter gave way to spring, Claire's initial elation at having eliminated her rival began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Despite her expectations, Oliver had not rushed into her arms in the wake of Taylor's death. In fact, he had become increasingly distant, avoiding her calls and making excuses to cancel their planned meetings. Frustrated and confused, Claire decided to confront Oliver at his office after hours. As she approached the building, she noticed a light on in his window. Peering inside, she saw Oliver in an intimate embrace with a woman she didn't recognize. The sight sent Claire reeling, her world crumbling around her. In that moment, the full weight of what she had done came crashing down on Claire. She had murdered an innocent woman, destroyed countless lives, all for a man who had never truly cared for her. The realization was devastating. Overwhelmed by guilt and anger, Claire stormed into Oliver's office, catching him and the unknown woman by surprise. What followed was a heated confrontation, with Claire unleashing years of pent-up pain and rage. She accused Oliver of using her, of manipulating her feelings to get rid of Taylor. Oliver, his carefully constructed facade finally cracking, didn't deny her accusations. Instead, he coldly informed Claire that she had served her purpose and was no longer needed. He threatened to expose her role in Taylor's death if she didn't disappear from his life for good. Shattered and desperate, Claire fled the office, her mind racing. She now realized the true extent of Oliver's manipulation and her own terrible mistake. As she drove home in a daze, Claire was unaware that her confrontation with Oliver had been witnessed by someone else, someone who would soon set in motion the final act of this tragic play. The woman Claire had seen with Oliver was Olivia Chen, a brilliant young lawyer who had recently joined Oliver's firm. Olivia had been drawn into an affair with Oliver, seduced by his charm and the promise of career advancement. However, unlike Claire, Olivia was not blind to Oliver's true nature. On the night of Claire's confrontation with Oliver, Olivia had hidden herself in an adjoining room, overhearing every word of their heated exchange. The revelation of Oliver's involvement in his wife's death left her cold with horror and disgust. In the days that followed, Olivia found herself grappling with a moral dilemma. She knew she should go to the police with what she had learned, but fear of professional repercussions and her own complicity in the affair held her back. As she observed Oliver continuing to play the role of grieving widower, her revulsion grew. Determined to uncover the full truth, Olivia began her own covert investigation. She meticulously combed through Oliver's files and emails, slowly piecing together the extent of his deceit. What she discovered went far beyond Taylor's murder, revealing a pattern of fraud and manipulation that spanned years. With each new revelation, Olivia's resolve strengthened. She knew what she had to do. Armed with the evidence she had gathered, Olivia confronted Oliver in his office late one evening. She laid out everything she had discovered, from his manipulation of Claire to his fraudulent business practices. Oliver, realizing the precariousness of his situation, attempted to charm and threaten Olivia into silence. But Olivia was prepared. She had secretly recorded their entire conversation, capturing Oliver's implicit admission of guilt. As she turned to leave, intending to take her evidence to the police, Oliver snapped. In a moment of panic and rage, he attacked Olivia, attempting to wrestle the recording device from her hands. What Oliver didn't know was that Olivia, haunted by the fate of Taylor Tanner Holbrook, had come prepared. In the struggle, she managed to reach into her purse and pull out a small pistol. A shot rang out, echoing through the empty office building. Oliver Holbrook, the man who had manipulated so many, who had indirectly caused the death of his wife and the ruin of Claire Reeves, crumpled to the floor. Olivia stood over him, the smoking gun still in her hand, a mix of shock and grim satisfaction on her face. As sirens wailed in the distance, Olivia calmly sat down to wait for the police. She knew that her actions would have consequences, but she also knew that the truth would finally come to light. Oliver Holbrook's reign of deception was over. The shot that killed Oliver Holbrook reverberated through Millbrook, setting off a chain reaction that would finally bring the full story of Taylor's death to light. As Olivia Chen was taken into custody, the true extent of Oliver's manipulations began to unravel. In the wake of Oliver Holbrook's death, the investigation into Taylor's murder took on new urgency. Detective Montague, armed with the evidence Olivia had gathered, began to piece together the full picture of events that had transpired over the past year. Claire Reeves, racked with guilt and fear, finally broke down under questioning. She confessed to her role in Taylor's death, providing a detailed account of her actions and motivations. Her testimony painted a damning picture of Oliver's manipulation and the extent to which he had orchestrated the events leading to his wife's murder. Claire, having confessed to Taylor's murder, was sentenced to life in prison. Olivia's case was more complex. She was convicted of manslaughter, but received a reduced sentence due to the circumstances surrounding Oliver's death. The tragic tale of Oliver Holbrook, Taylor Tanner, Claire Reeves, and Olivia Chen would be remembered for years to come, a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most picturesque surfaces. In the quiet, picturesque town of Pine Hill, the gruesome murder of Jennifer Johnson sent shockwaves through the community. What appeared to be a peaceful, close-knit suburban enclave was shattered by a crime of passion and betrayal that revealed the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives. The lives of two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner, and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, intertwined in ways that would lead to obsession, deceit, and ultimately, murder. Daniel Garner was a respected architect, known for his charming demeanor and seemingly perfect marriage to Linda, a dedicated school teacher. Mark Johnson, a successful financial advisor, and his wife Jennifer were the Garners' closest friends. The two couples shared more than just neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways. They also engaged in a consensual wife-swapping arrangement that initially brought excitement and novelty to their lives. However, beneath the surface of this unconventional lifestyle, dangerous emotions were brewing. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer grew into an all-consuming obsession, one that Linda, his wife, was painfully aware of. Jennifer, sensing the intensity of Daniel's feelings, decided to put an end to the arrangement, not realizing the deadly consequences her decision would provoke. Daniel and Linda Garner had been married for 10 years, and from the outside, their marriage appeared to be a model of stability and happiness. Daniel was a successful architect, known for his innovative designs and charismatic personality. Linda, a third-grade teacher, was beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street, surrounded by a well-tended garden that Linda took great pride in. Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Garners. Mark, a financial advisor, was outgoing and affable, always the life of the party. Jennifer, with her striking beauty and magnetic personality, was equally popular. The Johnsons' arrival brought a new dynamic to the neighborhood, and their friendship with the Garners blossomed over shared interests and mutual respect. The idea of wife-swapping was first brought up during a dinner party at the Garners' home. Fueled by wine and a sense of adventure, the conversation turned to the topic of open relationships. To everyone's surprise, The concept was met with curiosity rather than shock. Over the next few weeks, the idea was discussed more seriously, with all parties agreeing to boundaries and rules to ensure their primary relationships remained intact. The first encounter was awkward but exciting. Daniel and Jennifer, and Mark and Linda exchanged partners for the night. It was a thrilling yet nerve-wracking experience, but one that left them eager for more. What started as a once-in-a-while experiment soon became a regular part of their lives, adding a spark to both marriages. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well. Both couples appeared happier and more connected. They maintained their social activities, often hosting joint parties and going on vacations together. Their secret was carefully guarded, discussed only within the confines of their homes or during private gatherings. The novelty of the arrangement brought a sense of exhilaration, and for a while, it seemed like they had found the perfect balance. However, as the months passed, subtle changes began to surface, particularly in Daniel's behavior. He started to show an unusual amount of interest in Jennifer, often finding reasons to spend time alone with her. Linda noticed his increasing preoccupation, but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. Mark, too, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. Unbeknownst to the others, Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was turning into something deeper and more troubling. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying their encounters in his mind and craving more time with her. What had started as a harmless adventure was slowly morphing into an obsession that would have devastating consequences for all involved. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was no longer just a thrill. It had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. He thought about her incessantly, his mind wandering to their encounters during work meetings and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his passion, now seemed secondary to his desire for Jennifer. He started to find ways to be near her, volunteering to help with tasks Mark usually handled, or inviting the Johnsons over more frequently. Linda began to notice the change in her husband. At first, she attributed it to the excitement of their new lifestyle, but soon it became clear that Daniel's interest in Jennifer went beyond their agreement. He became irritable and distant when they weren't with the Johnsons, and his conversations often veered towards Jennifer's likes and dislikes, her quirks and habits. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted Daniel. His reaction was defensive, dismissing her concerns as jealousy. Linda, not wanting to disrupt the delicate balance they had established, let it go but kept a closer eye on him. Her suspicions grew when she found him staring at Jennifer during gatherings, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. Jennifer, too, began to sense Daniel's growing obsession. Initially flattered by his attention, she soon found it uncomfortable. His touches became more possessive, his words more intimate than appropriate. She discussed her discomfort with Mark, who brushed it off, believing Daniel was just more expressive in his affections. Mark's nonchalance left Jennifer feeling isolated in her concerns. The turning point came during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. The couples had planned the getaway to reconnect and enjoy some time away from their routine. However, the trip only served to highlight Daniel's fixation. He monopolized Jennifer's time, insisting on taking her out on the lake alone, leaving Mark and Linda behind. The tension was palpable, and Jennifer's attempts to distance herself were met with subtle resistance from Daniel. One night, while sitting by the fire, Daniel made a comment that crossed the line. He spoke about leaving everything behind and starting fresh, just the two of them. Jennifer, shocked and unsettled, excused herself and went to bed early. Linda, who had overheard the conversation, confronted Daniel again. This time he was less dismissive, but still refused to acknowledge the depth of his feelings. Linda's frustration grew as she realized the extent of Daniel's obsession. She loved her husband, but was increasingly aware that his infatuation with Jennifer could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite her efforts to intervene, Daniel's behavior only became more erratic. He started to follow Jennifer outside of their arranged meetings, showing up at her yoga classes, and even appearing at her workplace under the guise of casual visits. Jennifer's unease turned to fear. She confided in a close friend, who advised her to distance herself from Daniel as much as possible. Determined to take control, Jennifer decided to end the arrangement altogether. She hoped that by doing so, Daniel would return to his senses, and they could all move on from this chapter without causing further harm. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Daniel showed up at the Johnsons' house unannounced. Jennifer was taken aback but let him in, hoping to avoid a scene. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Daniel confessed his feelings for her, speaking of a future where they could be together openly. Jennifer, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was never meant to be more than a temporary excitement. As Daniel's declarations became more intense, Jennifer's fear turned to anger. She realized she needed to put an end to this before it destroyed her marriage and her friendship with Linda. She told Daniel firmly that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries and her marriage. Daniel, visibly shaken, tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Jennifer stood her ground. Over the next few days, Jennifer avoided Daniel, hoping he would come to his senses. She confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. Linda knew her husband's obsession had gone too far, and while she wanted to support Jennifer, she also felt a twisted loyalty to Daniel. She promised Jennifer she would talk to him, hoping to defuse the situation. However, Daniel's obsession only deepened. He started showing up at Jennifer's work, waiting for her after hours, and leaving her messages expressing his undying love. Jennifer, feeling increasingly unsafe, decided to confront him one last time, hoping to make him understand the gravity of his actions. They met at a secluded park away from prying eyes. Jennifer reiterated that their arrangement was over and that his behavior was unacceptable. She pleaded with him to let go and move on. Daniel, unable to accept her rejection, grew desperate. He accused her of leading him on and playing with his emotions. Jennifer, maintaining her composure, insisted that they part ways and return to their respective marriages. Unbeknownst to them, Linda had followed Daniel to the park. She watched from a distance, her heart pounding as she saw the confrontation unfold. She could see the anguish on Daniel's face and the determination on Jennifer's. Linda knew that this confrontation was inevitable, but she also feared what might happen next. As the argument escalated, Daniel's desperation turned to anger. Jennifer's refusal to entertain his fantasies felt like a personal betrayal. He lashed out verbally, calling her names and accusing her of ruining his life. Jennifer, holding back tears, stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Linda, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to intervene before things got out of hand. She stepped out of her hiding place and approached the two, her voice shaking as she called out to Daniel. The sight of Linda seemed to snap Daniel out of his rage, and he turned to her, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Jennifer, taking advantage of the distraction, walked away, determined to put as much distance between herself and Daniel as possible. Linda, now alone with her husband, tried to calm him down. She reassured him that they would find a way to move past this, but inside she knew that their lives had been irreversibly changed. The affair had reached its breaking point, and Jennifer's decision to end the arrangement had set off a chain of events that could not be undone. As the dust settled, the true extent of Daniel's obsession and the depths of Linda's complicity would soon come to light, leading to a tragic and violent conclusion. The confrontation at the park had left Daniel in a state of turmoil. Jennifer's firm rejection and Linda's unexpected appearance had shaken him to his core. He returned home that night, his mind a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and despair. Linda, sensing the storm brewing within him, tried to soothe his troubled thoughts, but Daniel remained inconsolable. Over the next few days, Daniel's behavior became increasingly erratic. He vacillated between bouts of intense anger and deep despondency. He stopped going to work, spending his days obsessing over Jennifer's rejection and the perceived injustices he had suffered. Linda, unable to reach him, felt her own frustration and fear growing. She knew something had to give, but she wasn't prepared for the drastic turn of events that would soon unfold. Jennifer, on the other hand, was determined to move forward. She avoided all contact with Daniel, focusing on her work and her relationship with Mark. She hadn't told her husband the full extent of Daniel's obsession, fearing his reaction and the potential fallout. She hoped that by cutting ties, Daniel would eventually come to terms with the end of their arrangement and leave her alone. One evening, Jennifer returned home from work to find Daniel waiting for her outside her house. Her heart sank at the sight of him, and she steeled herself for another confrontation. She approached him cautiously, her voice steady but firm as she told him to leave. Daniel, his eyes wild with desperation, begged her for one last chance to explain himself. Jennifer, sensing the futility of the conversation, tried to walk past him, but Daniel grabbed her arm, His grip was tight and painful, and Jennifer could see the madness in his eyes. She struggled to break free, her voice rising as she demanded he let go. The noise attracted the attention of a neighbor, who stepped outside to see what was happening. Seeing the neighbor, Daniel released Jennifer and fled. Jennifer, shaken and frightened, thanked the neighbor and hurried inside. She called Linda, hoping to find some way to resolve the situation without involving the police. Linda, hearing the fear in Jennifer's voice, agreed to meet with her the next day to discuss how to handle Daniel's increasingly unstable behavior. The next day, Linda met Jennifer at a local cafe. Jennifer, looking exhausted and tense, explained the encounter with Daniel and her growing fear for her safety. Linda listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. She promised Jennifer that she would talk to Daniel and make him understand that their relationship was over. After the meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel in a state of agitation. She confronted him about the incident with Jennifer, her voice a mix of anger and concern. Daniel, feeling cornered, lashed out at her, accusing her of taking Jennifer's side and betraying him. The argument escalated, and Linda, fearing for her own safety, retreated to their bedroom. That night, Daniel's thoughts turned darker. He couldn't accept that Jennifer had rejected him and that his own wife was against him. In his twisted mind, he believed that the only way to resolve the situation was to eliminate the source of his pain. He decided that if he couldn't have Jennifer, no one could. On a cold, clear night, Daniel made his way to the Johnsons' house. He knew Mark was out of town, leaving Jennifer alone. He broke in through a side window and made his way to the bedroom where Jennifer lay sleeping. The sight of her, peaceful and unaware, fueled his rage and desperation. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached her, his mind filled with a chaotic mix of love and hatred. Jennifer awoke to the sight of Daniel standing over her, the knife gleaming in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Daniel covered her mouth, his grip strong and unyielding. In a fit of rage, he plunged the knife into her chest, silencing her cries. As Jennifer's life slipped away, Daniel stood over her, his mind a haze of conflicting emotions. In the aftermath of the murder, Daniel fled the scene, his hands stained with Jennifer's blood. He returned home, where Linda found him trembling and incoherent. She realized immediately what he had done, and in a moment of twisted loyalty, she decided to help him cover up the crime. The life they had built, the secrets they had kept, were all at stake. Linda knew that if they were to survive, they needed to act quickly and decisively. Linda, driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation, quickly took control of the situation. She led Daniel to the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and wash off the blood. Her mind raced with the urgency of their predicament. She knew they had to act fast to cover up the crime and protect their secret life. As Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet, Linda gathered his clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. She scrubbed the floor where he had walked, making sure to eliminate any trace of blood. Once Daniel was cleaned up, she sat him down and forced him to recount every detail of what had happened. Despite his emotional state, Daniel managed to provide a coherent account, his voice shaking with the weight of his actions. Linda devised a plan. They needed to create an alibi and dispose of any evidence linking them to the crime. She called a trusted friend, claiming that Daniel had been with her all evening, ensuring their alibi was backed up. Then, she drove to a secluded area outside of town, where she burned Daniel's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, praying that the fire would consume any remaining evidence. The police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, including the Garners. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel, although visibly distressed, managed to avoid raising suspicion. The investigation seemed to stall, with no concrete leads pointing to the Garners. Despite their initial success in evading the authorities, the psychological toll of the murder weighed heavily on both Daniel and Linda. Daniel became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. He withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Linda, while outwardly composed, felt the strain of their secret pressing down on her. She became hyper-vigilant, scrutinizing every interaction and behavior for signs of suspicion from those around them. The weeks following Jennifer's murder were a blur of tension and deception for the Garners. Linda took on the role of the stabilizer, managing Daniel's paranoia while ensuring their public facade remained intact. She monitored the news for any updates on the investigation, relieved that the police seemed to have no solid leads. However, Linda knew that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to create a narrative that would divert attention away from Daniel. She suggested to Daniel that he should appear more distraught over Jennifer's death, to align with the community's grief and to throw off any suspicion. At social gatherings and community meetings, Daniel played the part of the grieving friend. He spoke of Jennifer with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes often welling up with tears. Mark, devastated and desperate for answers, seemed to appreciate Daniel's empathy, never suspecting his friend's involvement in his wife's death. Daniel's mental state deteriorated further, his guilt manifesting in nightmares and hallucinations. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace in alcohol but finding only temporary escape. Linda, fearing he might confess in a drunken stupor, kept a close eye on him, often staying up late to ensure he didn't leave the house. One evening, as Daniel sat slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down. He confessed to Linda that he couldn't live with the guilt any longer, that he needed to come clean. Linda, panicked, tried to calm him down. To help maintain their composure, Linda suggested they take a short trip out of town. They traveled to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the change of scenery would help Daniel regain some semblance of peace. The isolation provided a temporary respite, allowing them to plan their next steps without the constant pressure of the investigation looming over them. During their time at the cabin, Linda reinforced the importance of their secrecy. She coached Daniel on how to handle police questioning and public interactions, drilling him until he could respond without hesitation. Linda's determination to protect their lifestyle and avoid imprisonment fueled her relentless drive to keep their story straight. Upon returning to Pine Hill, the Garners resumed their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel, though still haunted by his actions, managed to present a more stable front. Linda continued to manage their interactions with the community, ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, the cracks in their facade were beginning to show. Friends and neighbors noticed Daniel's increased drinking and erratic behavior, and whispers of his possible involvement in Jennifer's death began to circulate. Linda, ever vigilant, worked to quash the rumors, but she knew their time was running out. As the police investigation continued, new evidence came to light, pointing towards inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi. The Garners' carefully constructed world was on the brink of collapse, and the truth was closer to being revealed than ever before. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Garners separately, noting any discrepancies in their stories. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel's emotional state seemed consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Mitchell's instincts told her there was more to the story. As the weeks passed, new evidence emerged. Forensic analysis of Jennifer's phone records revealed a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Daniel, indicating his obsession with her. Mitchell brought Daniel in for further questioning, pressing him on the inconsistencies in his alibi and the nature of his relationship with Jennifer. Daniel, struggling to maintain his composure, stuck to the story Linda had coached him on, but his nervousness and evasive answers only heightened the detective's suspicions. The turning point came when a neighbor came forward with crucial information. They had seen Daniel's car parked near the Johnsons' house on the night of the murder and remembered the strange behavior he had exhibited. This testimony, combined with the forensic evidence and Daniel's erratic behavior, was enough for the police to obtain a search warrant for the Garners' home. During the search, the police found remnants of the burned clothing and traces of blood that had seeped into the floorboards, despite Linda's thorough cleaning. This damning evidence, coupled with the witness testimony and phone records, painted a clear picture of Daniel's guilt. The net was closing in on the Garners, and Linda realized that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. She knew that their only chance of escaping a lengthy prison sentence was to come up with a new plan, one that would shift the blame away from them and onto someone else. As the police closed in, Linda and Daniel faced the harsh reality of their situation. The lies and deceit that had once protected them were now threatening to unravel completely, and the truth was about to be revealed in a way they could never have anticipated. As the evidence against Daniel mounted, Detective Mitchell prepared to make her move. She brought Daniel in for another round of questioning, this time with a different approach. She laid out all the evidence they had gathered, the phone records, the witness testimonies, and the forensic findings. Daniel, cornered and overwhelmed, began to crack under the pressure. Mitchell pressed harder, suggesting that if Daniel came clean, he might receive a more lenient sentence. Daniel, unable to handle the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, finally broke down. He confessed to killing Jennifer, describing his obsession, the confrontation, and the moment he lost control. However, in his confession, Daniel also implicated Linda, revealing her role in covering up the crime. He described how she had helped him clean up, dispose of evidence, and craft an alibi. Mitchell, sensing the opportunity to get the full story, had Linda brought in for questioning as well. Confronted with Daniel's confession, Linda initially denied any involvement, but as Mitchell detailed the evidence in Daniel's account, Linda realized there was no way out. Her carefully constructed lies had finally unraveled. She admitted to helping Daniel, explaining that she had done it out of a misguided sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything they had built. The trial of Daniel and Linda Garner captivated Pine Hill and the surrounding region. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, eager to see the conclusion of the tragic tale. Daniel, charged with first-degree murder, and Linda, charged with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, both pled guilty to their respective charges. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda, despite her role in the cover-up, received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with the investigation and her previously clean record. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. Mark Johnson, left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, found some solace in the justice served, but continued to mourn the loss of his beloved wife. The quiet town of Greenfield was shaken to its core when the body of Jack Thompson was discovered in his modest home on the outskirts of town. Jack, a well-liked middle-aged man known for his generosity and calm demeanor, had recently gone through a tumultuous divorce from his wife, Layla. The divorce, finalized just months prior, had left Jack visibly strained, but no one could have anticipated the tragic end he would meet. Layla Thompson, once the high school sweetheart and longtime partner of Jack, had quickly moved on after their split. She found solace in Derek Stone, a charismatic yet troubled man with a shadowy past. Derek, a former convict with a history of violent offenses, had swept Layla off her feet, bringing a sense of danger and excitement into her life that she had never experienced before. The discovery of Jack's lifeless body under suspicious circumstances set off a whirlwind investigation that uncovered a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and revenge. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek became the focal point of the investigation, revealing dark secrets and motives that lay hidden beneath the surface. Greenfield's local police force, led by Detective Sarah Lawson, was tasked with untangling the complex relationships and finding the truth behind Jack's untimely death. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was not just a simple case of a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned act of vengeance. In the weeks that followed, the town would witness shocking revelations and unexpected twists, as the true nature of the relationships between Jack, Layla, and Derek came to light. The line between victim and perpetrator blurred, leaving everyone to wonder who could be trusted and who was hiding the darkest secrets. Jack and Layla Thompson's marriage had once been the epitome of stability and love. They had met in high school, their romance blossoming over the years into a marriage that seemed unbreakable. Jack, a kind-hearted man with a steady job as a schoolteacher, had always been the rock in their relationship. Layla, a nurse at the local hospital, complemented his steadiness with her nurturing and compassionate nature. However, as the years passed, the spark in their relationship began to fade. The stresses of daily life, combined with their inability to have children, placed a strain on their marriage. Layla's desire for excitement and change grew, leading her to seek solace outside their relationship. This quest for something new ultimately led her to Derek Stone. Derek Stone was a man with a troubled past. He had spent several years in prison for armed robbery and assault, but upon his release, he had vowed to turn his life around. His rugged good looks and charm quickly won Layla over, offering her the thrill and unpredictability she craved. Derek's presence in her life provided a stark contrast to the stability she had known with Jack. The affair between Layla and Derek was passionate and intense, leading to the eventual breakdown of her marriage to Jack. The divorce was bitter, with accusations and recriminations flying from both sides. Jack was devastated, unable to comprehend how the woman he had loved for so long could betray him in such a manner. Layla, on the other hand, felt liberated, ready to start a new chapter with Derek. Despite his attempts to move on, Jack found it difficult to let go of the past. He remained deeply in love with Layla, his heart aching at the thought of her with another man. His friends and colleagues noticed the change in him, his once cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet sadness. Jack's attempts to rekindle his relationship with Layla were met with hostility, further deepening his despair. Derek, meanwhile, harbored his own grudges. He resented Jack for the hold he still seemed to have over Layla, and his violent tendencies began to resurface. Derek's jealousy and possessiveness became more pronounced, leading to frequent arguments with Layla. Despite this, Layla remained committed to Derek, convinced that their love was worth the turmoil. As the months passed, the tension between Jack, Layla, and Derek grew, setting the stage for the tragic events that were about to unfold. The love triangle, fraught with jealousy and resentment, would soon explode in a manner that would shock the entire town of Greenfield and leave a trail of devastation in its wake. The crisp autumn morning was shattered by the piercing scream of Mrs. Henderson, Jack's elderly neighbor, as she discovered his lifeless body sprawled across the living room floor. She had come over to check on Jack after noticing that his mail had piled up over the past few days. Her concern quickly turned to horror as she stumbled upon the gruesome scene. The local police were called immediately, and within minutes Detective Sarah Lawson and her team arrived at the scene. The sight that greeted them was both disturbing and puzzling. Jack's body lay in a pool of blood, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. There were signs of a violent struggle, with furniture overturned and broken glass scattered across the floor. As the forensic team began their meticulous work, Detective Lawson interviewed Mrs. Henderson. The elderly woman, still visibly shaken, recounted her discovery and her interactions with Jack in the days leading up to his death. She mentioned hearing raised voices coming from Jack's house a few nights before, but she had assumed it was just another argument between him and Layla. Layla and Derek were quickly brought in for questioning. Layla appeared distraught, her eyes red from crying. Derek, on the other hand, was stoic, his expression unreadable. Detective Lawson noted the stark contrast between the two, her instincts telling her that there was more to their story than met the eye. Layla recounted her last interaction with Jack. She claimed that she had not seen him for several days, and that their last conversation had been about finalizing the sale of their former home. Derek corroborated Layla's account, stating that they had spent the night of Jack's death at his apartment, miles away from the crime scene. Despite their alibis, Detective Lawson couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She ordered a thorough search of Derek's apartment and began to dig deeper into his past. The initial results of the forensic analysis pointed towards a struggle, with Jack having put up a significant fight against his attacker. There were signs of blunt force trauma to his head, suggesting that he had been struck multiple times with a heavy object. The discovery of a bloodied baseball bat in Jack's garage further complicated the investigation. The bat had Jack's fingerprints on it, but there were also smudges that suggested someone else had handled it. Detective Lawson sent the bat to the lab for further analysis, hoping it would provide a crucial lead. The townspeople of Greenfield were abuzz with speculation. Theories ranged from a robbery gone wrong to a crime of passion. Jack's friends and colleagues were interviewed, painting a picture of a man who was deeply troubled but not without enemies. Layla and Derek's tumultuous relationship became a focal point of the investigation, with many suspecting that their involvement went beyond just an affair. Detective Lawson knew that unraveling the truth behind Jack's death would require piecing together the fragmented lives of the people involved. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek was fraught with complexities, and she was determined to uncover every hidden detail, no matter how dark or disturbing. The investigation into Jack Thompson's murder began in earnest, with Detective Sarah Lawson leading the charge. Her first step was to establish a timeline of events leading up to Jack's death. She and her team interviewed neighbors, friends, and family, piecing together the last known movements of Jack, Layla, and Derek. The neighbors provided a wealth of information. Several had heard loud arguments coming from Jack's house in the days before his death. One neighbor, Mr. Parker, reported seeing a shadowy figure lurking around Jack's property late at night, although he couldn't provide a clear description. Another neighbor, Mrs. Green, mentioned seeing Layla leave Jack's house in a hurry the day before his body was found. Detective Lawson interviewed Layla's colleagues at the hospital, who described her as a dedicated nurse, but noted that she had become increasingly distracted and agitated in recent months. One colleague, Susan, recalled Layla confiding in her about the stress of her divorce and her volatile relationship with Derek. Susan mentioned that Layla had expressed fear for her safety on several occasions, hinting at Derek's violent tendencies. The investigation also delved into Derek's background. Detective Lawson discovered that Derek had a history of violence and had been in and out of prison for various offenses, including assault and armed robbery. She interviewed some of Derek's former associates, who painted a picture of a man prone to explosive outbursts and a deep-seated need for control. One former associate, Mike, mentioned that Derek had often talked about exacting revenge on anyone who wronged him. Despite Derek's troubling past, his alibi for the night of Jack's murder seemed solid. However, Detective Lawson couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that suggested he had a motive for wanting Jack out of the picture. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes, found during the search of his apartment, further fueled her suspicions. Layla's inconsistent statements also raised red flags. During her initial interview, she had claimed not to have seen Jack for days. However, Mrs. Green's account contradicted this, placing Layla at Jack's house the day before his death. When confronted with this discrepancy, Layla became defensive, insisting that she had only gone to collect some personal belongings and had left after a brief argument. As the investigation progressed, Detective Lawson uncovered a series of text messages between Layla and Derek that suggested they had discussed plans to confront Jack about his continued interference in their relationship. The messages hinted at a growing frustration with Jack and a desire to put an end to the constant conflict. Despite the mounting evidence, the case was far from straightforward. Detective Lawson knew that she needed more concrete proof to build a solid case against Derek and Layla. She ordered a thorough analysis of the crime scene, hoping to find forensic evidence that would link them directly to Jack's murder. The community of Greenfield watched anxiously as the investigation unfolded. The once quiet town was now the center of a media frenzy, with reporters flocking to cover the sensational story. The pressure on Detective Lawson and her team was immense, but she remained steadfast in her determination to uncover the truth and bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder deepened, suspicions surrounding Layla and Derek grew more pronounced. Detective Lawson and her team scrutinized every detail, piecing together the puzzle that seemed to implicate both Layla and Derek in Jack's death. Layla's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her initial grief gave way to a defensive and hostile attitude during subsequent interviews. When questioned about her presence at Jack's house, she provided conflicting accounts, further muddying the waters. Her colleagues at the hospital noted her frequent absences and whispered conversations on her phone, fueling speculation about her involvement in something sinister. Detective Lawson also focused on Derek's suspicious behavior. Despite his alibi, there were inconsistencies that couldn't be ignored. Derek had claimed to be at his apartment on the night of the murder, but surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed his car on the road during the time frame in question. The footage, though grainy, provided enough evidence to warrant further investigation. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes was a significant breakthrough. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood matched Jack's, placing Derek at the crime scene. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's composure cracked. He denied any involvement, claiming that he had been framed, but his increasingly erratic behavior only deepened Detective Lawson's suspicions. Layla's phone records revealed a series of heated exchanges between her and Derek in the days leading up to Jack's murder. The messages hinted at a plan to confront Jack and put an end to the constant turmoil he was causing in their lives. The tone of the messages grew more aggressive, with Derek urging Layla to take decisive action. One particular message stood out. Derek had texted Layla the night before the murder, saying, "It's time we take care of this once and for all." Layla's response was cryptic, but seemed to indicate her agreement. The messages provided a chilling glimpse into the escalating tension between the three individuals. Detective Lawson's team also uncovered financial records that revealed Layla had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Jack. The policy, worth a significant amount, named Layla as the sole beneficiary. The timing of the policy raised eyebrows, suggesting a possible financial motive for Jack's murder. As the evidence mounted, Detective Lawson knew she needed a confession to solidify the case. She decided to apply pressure on Layla, hoping to exploit the cracks in her story. During a tense interrogation, Layla finally broke down. She admitted to visiting Jack's house the day before his death, but insisted that she had left before anything happened. She claimed that Derek had become increasingly unhinged, pressuring her to cut all ties with Jack. Detective Lawson also interviewed Derek's former associates again, this time focusing on his violent tendencies and potential motive. Mike, the former associate who had mentioned Derek's penchant for revenge, revealed that Derek had often spoken about wanting to eliminate anyone who threatened his relationship with Layla. Despite the mounting evidence against Derek, the investigation faced a critical juncture. Detective Lawson needed concrete proof to link Derek directly to the crime. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover the final piece of the puzzle that would bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder continued, Detective Sarah Lawson delved deeper into Derek Stone's past. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear that Derek was a man with a history of violence and a potential for revenge. Derek's criminal record revealed a series of offenses dating back to his teenage years. He had been involved in gang activities, petty thefts, and assaults. His most serious conviction, however, was for armed robbery, which had landed him in prison for several years. During his incarceration, Derek had been involved in multiple altercations with other inmates, further highlighting his violent tendencies. Detective Lawson interviewed some of Derek's former associates, hoping to gain insight into his behavior and motives. Mike, the associate who had previously hinted at Derek's vengeful nature, provided a chilling account of Derek's time in prison. According to Mike, Derek had developed a reputation for being ruthless and unforgiving, often targeting those who crossed him or posed a threat. One former associate, Steve, recounted a particularly disturbing incident. Derek had been involved in a violent altercation with another inmate who had insulted him. The fight had left the inmate severely injured, and Derek had shown no remorse. Steve described Derek as a man who thrived on control and power, traits that had only intensified during his time behind bars. Detective Lawson also discovered that Derek had a history of unstable relationships. His ex-girlfriend, Lisa, came forward with her own harrowing account of their time together. Lisa described Derek as charming and attentive at first, but his demeanor quickly changed. He became possessive and abusive, isolating her from friends and family. She eventually managed to escape the relationship, but remained fearful of Derek's potential for violence. Lisa's account provided further insight into Derek's character. She mentioned that Derek had often spoken about his desire for revenge against anyone who wronged him. He harbored deep-seated grudges and was willing to go to great lengths to settle scores. Detective Lawson realized that Derek's relationship with Layla and his resentment towards Jack fit this pattern perfectly. Armed with this new information, Detective Lawson intensified her efforts to find concrete evidence linking Derek to Jack's murder. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover any items that could connect him to the crime scene. The search yielded several pieces of potential evidence, including a set of keys that matched the locks on Jack's house and a blood-stained shirt hidden in the back of Derek's closet. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the shirt matched Jack's, providing a direct link between Derek and the crime. This discovery was a significant breakthrough, but Detective Lawson knew that it was not enough on its own to secure a conviction. She needed a confession or additional evidence to solidify the case. Detective Lawson decided to confront Derek with the new evidence, hoping to elicit a reaction. During the interrogation, Derek's composure began to crack. He vehemently denied any involvement, but his increasingly erratic behavior suggested otherwise. Layla, who had been brought in for questioning once again, appeared visibly shaken when confronted with the evidence against Derek. In a desperate bid to save herself, Layla began to distance herself from Derek. She claimed that he had manipulated her and that she had been too afraid to leave him. Layla's statements, while self-serving, provided further insight into the toxic and volatile nature of their relationship. Detective Lawson knew she was close to unraveling the truth, but she needed one final push to bring the case to its conclusion. As the investigation reached its critical juncture, new evidence and unexpected revelations added further complexity to the case. Detective Sarah Lawson and her team were determined to untangle the web of deceit that surrounded Jack Thompson's murder. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from an unexpected source. A former inmate who had shared a cell with Derek, named Tony, came forward with crucial information. Tony revealed that Derek had confided in him about his plan to get rid of Jack. According to Tony, Derek had expressed his frustration with Jack's continued presence in Layla's life and had boasted about his intention to eliminate the problem once and for all. Tony's account added weight to the theory that Derek had premeditated the murder. He provided specific details that matched the evidence found at the crime scene, including the use of the baseball bat as the murder weapon. Tony's testimony was a game-changer, providing the corroboration Detective Lawson needed to build a solid case against Derek. However, the investigation took an unexpected turn when Layla's secret was uncovered. Detective Lawson's team discovered a series of hidden bank accounts in Layla's name, containing large sums of money that she had been siphoning off over the past few years. This revelation raised questions about Layla's true motives and her potential involvement in the murder. Layla's financial records revealed that she had been planning to leave Derek and start a new life. She had been saving money in secret, waiting for the right moment to make her escape. This newfound information painted a different picture of Layla, suggesting that she might have had her own reasons for wanting Jack out of the way. Detective Lawson confronted Layla with the evidence of the hidden bank accounts. Layla broke down, admitting that she had been trapped in a toxic and abusive relationship with Derek. She confessed that she had feared for her life and had been planning to escape, but insisted that she had no involvement in Jack's murder. Layla claimed that Derek had acted alone, driven by his own jealous rage. As the investigation unfolded, another twist emerged. A third party, previously unknown to the investigators, was discovered to have had contact with both Layla and Derek. This individual, named Ryan, was a former colleague of Derek's from his criminal days. Ryan had recently been released from prison and had reconnected with Derek. Detective Lawson brought Ryan in for questioning, hoping to uncover his role in the case. Ryan admitted to meeting with Derek and Layla on several occasions, but denied any involvement in the murder. However, his statements were inconsistent, and his nervous demeanor suggested that he was hiding something. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Ryan's fingerprints were found on the baseball bat used to kill Jack. Under intense interrogation, Ryan finally cracked. He confessed that Derek had enlisted his help in carrying out the murder, promising him a share of the life insurance money that Layla had taken out on Jack. Ryan revealed that Derek had planned every detail, from the initial confrontation to the disposal of evidence. Ryan's confession provided the missing piece of the puzzle, implicating both Derek and himself in the murder. Layla's role remained murky, but the evidence suggested that she had been a pawn in Derek's twisted game. Detective Lawson knew that the case was far from straightforward, but she was determined to bring those responsible to justice. With Ryan's confession in hand, Detective Sarah Lawson prepared for the final confrontation. She knew that Derek Stone would not go down without a fight, and she braced herself for a tense and potentially dangerous encounter. Detective Lawson and her team planned a coordinated effort to arrest Derek. They decided to approach him at his apartment, where he had been staying with Layla. The element of surprise was crucial, as they anticipated that Derek might attempt to flee or react violently. On the day of the operation, the team moved swiftly and efficiently. Detective Lawson knocked on Derek's door, her heart pounding with anticipation. Derek answered, his expression a mix of surprise and defiance. Detective Lawson presented the evidence and Ryan's confession, informing Derek that he was under arrest for the murder of Jack Thompson. Derek's reaction was immediate and explosive. He lunged at Detective Lawson, shouting accusations and threats. The officers quickly subdued him, but not before Derek managed to land a few blows. His resistance only served to reinforce the image of a violent and unstable individual, further sealing his fate. As Derek was taken into custody, Layla was brought in for questioning once again. The revelation of Ryan's involvement had shaken her, and she seemed genuinely terrified of Derek. Layla insisted that she had been unaware of the full extent of Derek's plan, and that she had never intended for Jack to be harmed. Despite Layla's claims, the evidence suggested that she had at least some knowledge of Derek's intentions. Detective Lawson pressed her for details, hoping to unravel the final threads of the case. Under intense questioning, Layla admitted that she had suspected Derek was planning something, but had been too afraid to confront him. The climax of the investigation came when Derek, now facing the reality of his situation, decided to cut a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to provide a full confession and implicate Layla in the planning of the murder. Derek's confession was chilling, detailing the calculated and cold-blooded manner in which he had orchestrated Jack's death. Derek revealed that he had manipulated Layla into taking out the life insurance policy on Jack, promising her a future free from financial worries. He had then enlisted Ryan's help, using his former associate's desperation and loyalty to carry out the crime. Derek admitted that he had been driven by jealousy and a desire for control, unable to tolerate Jack's continued presence in Layla's life. Layla, confronted with Derek's confession, broke down completely. She admitted to her role in the plan, though she maintained that she had never intended for Jack to be killed. Her fear of Derek and her desire for freedom had clouded her judgment, leading her down a dark and tragic path. With both Derek and Layla in custody, the case against them was solid. The legal proceedings moved swiftly, with Derek receiving a life sentence for his role as the mastermind behind the murder. Layla, though complicit, received a lesser sentence due to her cooperation and the evidence of her abusive relationship with Derek. The town of Greenfield, though forever changed by the events, found a renewed sense of unity and resilience. The legacy of Jack Thompson lived on, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of seeking justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Donald and Violet Dawson were the golden couple of Riverview. They moved into their elegant two-story house on Maple Street 5 years ago, quickly becoming popular in the tight-knit community. Donald's wit and charm made him a favorite at neighborhood gatherings, while Violet's warm smile and artistic talent endeared her to everyone she met. Together they hosted barbecues, attended charity events, and were often seen jogging together in the mornings, embodying the image of marital bliss. Donald's career as a financial analyst was thriving. He had a keen eye for investments and was climbing the corporate ladder with impressive speed. His colleagues admired his work ethic and sharp mind, often turning to him for advice on financial matters. Violet, on the other hand, ran a successful freelance graphic design business from home. Her designs were in high demand, and she had a loyal client base that appreciated her creativity and attention to detail. Their social circle included other young professionals and couples who often praised their relationship. They seemed to complement each other perfectly. Donald was the outgoing, ambitious partner, while Violet provided a nurturing and supportive presence. They had no children, but they doted on their golden retriever, Max, treating him like their own child. To anyone looking in from the outside, Donald and Violet had it all. But as the months turned into years, small cracks began to appear in their perfect facade. The first signs of trouble were the minor arguments over mundane household matters. Violet would complain about Donald leaving his clothes on the floor or not doing his share of the chores. Donald, in turn, would criticize Violet for her spending habits or the way she managed her time. These disagreements were brushed off as normal marital spats, but they hinted at deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. Their friends noticed the change but didn't think much of it. After all, every couple had their moments of discord. However, those who spent more time with the Dawsons sensed a growing tension. Violet's laughter seemed more forced, and Donald's affectionate gestures appeared increasingly performative. Yet in public, they maintained their image of the perfect couple, never letting their private conflicts spill into their social life. Despite these early signs, Donald and Violet continued to present a united front. They celebrated anniversaries with lavish dinners and weekend getaways, posted loving messages on social media, and attended couples therapy sessions to work on their issues. But behind closed doors, the fights grew more frequent and intense, setting the stage for the dark and twisted events that would ultimately lead to tragedy. As the months went by, the arguments between Donald and Violet became more frequent and intense. The issues that once seemed trivial now escalated into full-blown fights. Donald's controlling behavior began to surface, and Violet's frustration grew with each passing day. The idyllic image of their marriage was slowly disintegrating, revealing a toxic dynamic that neither of them could escape. Donald's control over Violet extended beyond the household chores. He began dictating how she should dress, whom she could meet, and even how she should spend her free time. Violet, once an independent and confident woman, found herself constantly walking on eggshells trying to avoid Donald's wrath. She started to withdraw from her friends, making excuses for not attending social events or meeting for coffee. Her friends noticed the change, but were unsure how to approach the subject. One evening, during a dinner party at their home, the tension between Donald and Violet was palpable. Violet accidentally spilled wine on the tablecloth, and Donald's reaction was swift and harsh. He berated her in front of their guests, his face contorted with anger. The room fell silent, the awkwardness thick in the air. Violet apologized meekly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Their friends exchanged uneasy glances, but tried to carry on with the evening, not wanting to exacerbate the situation. After the guests left, Donald continued his tirade. Violet tried to defend herself, but her words only seemed to fuel his anger. It was during these moments that Violet glimpsed the darker side of Donald, a side that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The man she had once admired and loved was now a source of fear and anxiety. Violet confided in her sister Rachel about the growing issues in her marriage. Rachel was shocked to hear about Donald's behavior, as he had always been charming and respectful around her. She urged Violet to consider leaving him, but Violet was hesitant. She still loved Donald and hoped that their issues could be resolved through therapy and open communication. Donald, on the other hand, dismissed the idea of therapy. He believed that Violet was overreacting and that their problems were normal marital issues. He continued to exert control over every aspect of Violet's life, from her work to her friendships. Violet felt increasingly isolated and trapped, her once vibrant personality dimming under the weight of Donald's dominance. The unraveling of Donald and Violet's marriage was rooted in their pasts, hidden traumas and manipulative tendencies that had remained buried until now. Donald's need for control stemmed from his childhood, where he grew up in a household dominated by his tyrannical father. Witnessing his mother's submissiveness and his father's oppressive behavior, Donald internalized the notion that control was synonymous with love and respect. Violet's past was marked by a different kind of trauma. She had been in an abusive relationship during her college years, which left her with deep emotional scars. She had worked hard to rebuild her life, seeking therapy and finding solace in her career. Meeting Donald had seemed like a fresh start, a chance to leave her painful past behind. But as the years went by, the echoes of her past trauma resurfaced, exacerbated by Donald's controlling behavior. Their marriage, which had once seemed like a partnership of equals, transformed into a battleground of wills. Donald's manipulative tendencies became more pronounced, and Violet's hidden traumas were exploited. Donald would use Violet's past against her, belittling her experiences and making her feel unworthy of love and respect. He manipulated her emotions, alternating between affectionate gestures and harsh criticisms, leaving Violet constantly second-guessing herself. Violet's attempts to seek help from friends or family were often thwarted by Donald's interference. He would charm her friends, making them believe that Violet was exaggerating or being overly sensitive. He isolated her from those who could offer support, ensuring that she remained dependent on him. Violet's cries for help were met with skepticism, as Donald's outward charm and charisma masked his true nature. The twisted game of manipulation and control escalated over time. Donald would gaslight Violet, making her doubt her own perceptions and memories. He would hide her belongings, then accuse her of being forgetful. He would criticize her appearance and decisions, undermining her confidence. Violet, caught in this web of psychological abuse, felt her sense of reality slipping away. Despite the escalating abuse, Violet clung to the hope that things could change. She believed that if she just tried harder, if she just loved Donald enough, things would go back to the way they were. She blamed herself for the growing tension, convinced that she was the problem. Donald reinforced this belief, using it to tighten his grip on her. The turning point in Donald and Violet's tumultuous relationship came one night during an argument that escalated beyond verbal altercations. It started as a typical disagreement over household chores, but the tension quickly mounted. Donald's face twisted with anger as he accused Violet of being lazy and ungrateful. Violet, her patience worn thin, snapped back, telling Donald that she was tired of his constant criticism and control. The argument spiraled out of control, with both of them shouting and hurling accusations. Donald's anger boiled over, and for the first time he struck Violet. The force of the blow sent her reeling, her cheek stinging from the impact. The room fell silent, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Donald, momentarily stunned by his own actions, quickly regained his composure and began to apologize profusely. He promised it would never happen again, blaming the stress from work and the pressures of life. Violet, shocked and hurt, didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined that their arguments would turn physical. Despite her fear, a part of her still clung to the hope that Donald could change. She accepted his apology, convincing herself that it was a one-time incident, an unfortunate outburst that wouldn't be repeated. But the physical abuse didn't stop. Over the following weeks, Donald's outbursts became more frequent and violent. Violet tried to hide the bruises, making excuses for her injuries when friends or colleagues asked. She became adept at covering up the signs of abuse, using makeup to mask the bruises and long sleeves to hide the marks. Her once vibrant spirit was replaced by a shadow of her former self, her eyes reflecting a deep-seated fear and sadness. In a desperate attempt to break free from the cycle of abuse, Violet confided in her closest friend, Kate. She told Kate about the physical violence and Donald's controlling behavior, hoping that sharing her secret would give her the strength to leave. Kate was horrified and immediately offered her support, urging Violet to contact a domestic violence hotline and seek help. Violet took Kate's advice and called the hotline. Speaking to a counselor who provided her with resources and a safety plan, she started to make preparations to leave, gathering important documents and saving money in a hidden account. Violet felt a glimmer of hope, believing that she could escape the nightmare her life had become. However, Donald's control over Violet was stronger than she anticipated. He grew suspicious of her actions, noticing the small changes in her behavior and the secretive nature of her movements. His paranoia intensified, and he began to monitor her closely, checking her phone and following her when she left the house. Violet's attempts to break free were thwarted at every turn as Donald tightened his grip on her life. The breaking point came when Violet tried to leave one night, only to be caught by Donald as she was sneaking out of the house with a suitcase. Enraged, Donald dragged her back inside, accusing her of betrayal and threatening her with dire consequences if she ever tried to leave again. Violet, terrified and defeated, realized that escaping Donald's control was more difficult than she had ever imagined. In the days that followed, Donald's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He installed surveillance cameras in the house, monitored Violet's every move, and cut off her access to the outside world. Violet felt like a prisoner in her own home, her every action scrutinized and controlled. The glimmer of hope that had once sustained her was extinguished, replaced by a sense of despair and resignation. The twisted game of manipulation and control had reached a dangerous new level, with Donald's paranoia and violence threatening to consume them both. Despite the overwhelming fear and isolation, Violet continued to hold on to a sliver of hope. She documented the abuse in a hidden journal, detailing each incident with meticulous care. One night, after a particularly violent argument, Violet decided she couldn't take it anymore. The fight had started over a minor issue, Donald accusing her of not cooking dinner to his liking, but it quickly escalated. Donald's rage was uncontrollable, and he beat Violet until she was barely conscious. As she lay on the floor, battered and bleeding, Violet made a silent vow to escape no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Violet meticulously planned her escape. She reached out to Kate through a coded message, arranging a time and place to meet. Kate, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to help without hesitation. On the night of their planned escape, Violet waited until Donald was asleep before making her move. She quietly gathered her pre-packed bag and slipped out of the house. Her heart pounded in her chest as she made her way to the meeting spot, every shadow and sound amplifying her fear. Kate was waiting at the designated spot, her car idling and ready to go. Violet climbed into the passenger seat, her hands shaking as she clutched her bag. Kate didn't waste any time, driving away from the house as quickly as possible. The sense of relief Violet felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly tempered by the realization that her freedom was still fragile. They drove to a nearby town, where Kate had arranged for Violet to stay at a women's shelter. The shelter provided a safe haven, a place where Violet could begin to rebuild her life without fear of Donald's retribution. The staff at the shelter were supportive and understanding, helping Violet navigate the legal process of obtaining a restraining order and pressing charges against Donald. For the first time in years, Violet felt a glimmer of hope. She was surrounded by people who believed her, who validated her experiences, and provided her with the support she desperately needed. The journey to recovery was daunting, but Violet was determined to reclaim her life and break free from the cycle of abuse. However, Donald was not willing to let go so easily. When he discovered Violet's absence, his rage knew no bounds. He used every resource at his disposal to track her down, refusing to accept that she had escaped his control. The twisted game of manipulation and control had reached its final, deadly stage, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have tragic consequences. Violet had been staying at the women's shelter for a few weeks, slowly beginning to heal and regain her sense of self. The staff and other residents provided a supportive community, helping her navigate the complexities of her situation. She had obtained a restraining order against Donald, and the shelter had taken measures to ensure her safety. However, Donald's obsession with Violet only grew stronger in her absence. He scoured social media to track her down. His need to control her had reached a dangerous level, driven by a toxic mix of anger, jealousy, and possessiveness. Donald's paranoia and determination to reclaim Violet culminated in a meticulously planned confrontation. On the night of June 27th, Donald finally discovered Violet's location. He had been stalking the shelter for days, watching and waiting for the right moment. When he saw Violet leave the shelter to run an errand, he followed her, careful to remain undetected. Violet was unaware of his presence, her mind occupied with thoughts of her new life and the steps she needed to take to move forward. As Violet returned to the shelter, she felt a strange unease, a sense that something was not right. She quickened her pace, her heart racing as she approached the shelter's entrance. Before she could reach the door, Donald appeared, blocking her path. The look in his eyes was a chilling combination of rage and determination. Donald's voice was low and menacing as he demanded that Violet come with him. Violet tried to remain calm, her voice shaking as she told him to leave and that she had a restraining order against him. But Donald was beyond reason. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful, and started dragging her towards his car. Violet struggled, screaming for help, but the street was deserted and her cries went unanswered. In a desperate bid to break free, Violet managed to pull out her phone and dial 911. The call connected, but before she could speak, Donald slapped the phone out of her hand, sending it crashing to the ground. Violet's panic intensified as she realized the severity of the situation. Donald's anger was palpable, his grip on her arm unrelenting. In a final desperate attempt to escape, Violet kicked Donald and tried to run. But Donald was faster and stronger. He caught up to her and, in a fit of rage, began to beat her mercilessly. Violet's cries for help echoed through the empty street, but no one came to her aid. Donald's fury was uncontrollable, and he didn't stop until Violet lay motionless on the ground. As the reality of what he had done sank in, Donald's rage gave way to panic. He looked around, realizing that the commotion could attract attention. He quickly dragged Violet's body to his car, his mind racing as he tried to think of a plan. He knew he needed to get rid of the evidence and cover his tracks. Donald drove to a remote area outside of town, a place he knew would be deserted at this hour. He put his hand on her neck. There was no pulse. He carried her into the woods, his heart pounding as he dug a shallow grave. He placed her body in the grave, covering it with dirt and debris. Donald's hands shook as he worked, the reality of his actions hitting him with full force. He knew there was no turning back. After burying Violet, Donald returned to his car, his mind racing with thoughts of how to cover his tracks. He disposed of her belongings, including her phone, and cleaned the car meticulously, trying to eliminate any traces of evidence. Donald knew that the police would come looking for him, but he was confident that he could outsmart them. Back at the shelter, the staff discovered Violet's absence and the signs of a struggle near the entrance. They immediately called the police, reporting her missing and providing details of her situation. The police launched an investigation, quickly identifying Donald as the prime suspect. The investigation was swift and thorough. Donald's history of abuse, the restraining order, and his known obsession with Violet made him the obvious suspect. The police tracked his movements, interviewed witnesses, and gathered evidence. It didn't take long for them to piece together the events of that fateful night. Friends and family were interviewed, providing crucial insights into the dynamics of Donald and Violet's relationship. Kate, Violet's closest friend, recounted the numerous times Violet had confided in her about the abuse. She shared the details of Violet's escape plan and their coded messages, revealing the extent of Violet's fear and desperation. Kate's testimony painted a stark contrast between the public image of the Dawsons and the dark reality behind closed doors. Rachel, Violet's sister, spoke of the early signs of trouble she had noticed in their marriage. She described Donald's controlling behavior and the gradual isolation of Violet from her family. Rachel's account of Violet's past trauma and her struggles to rebuild her life added another layer to the understanding of the abuse she had endured. During the interrogation, Donald initially tried to maintain his innocence, but the weight of the evidence was too great. His story unraveled under the pressure, and he eventually confessed to the murder. He described the events of that night with chilling detail, his voice devoid of remorse or empathy. Donald's confession confirmed the police's findings, solidifying the case against him. The community of Riverview was shocked by the revelations. The couple they had once admired and envied had been hiding a dark and twisted reality. The news of Violet's murder and the details of the abuse she had suffered sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The unraveling of Donald and Violet's relationship, from the seemingly perfect marriage to the tragic and violent end, served as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse. After several days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Donald was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His fate was sealed, and the community of Riverview could begin to heal. The murder of Violet Dawson was a tragic and heartbreaking event that left an indelible mark on the community of Riverview. The seemingly perfect couple, whose public life had been the envy of many, was revealed to have been hiding a dark and twisted reality. Sebastian Thompson, a successful businessman, and Hazel, his homemaker wife, had been married for 15 years. Their marriage, once vibrant, had been faltering, prompting them to seek professional help. They enrolled in a retreat led by the renowned Dr. David Green, a charismatic therapist with a reputation for mending fractured relationships. On the fourth night of the retreat, Sebastian was found dead in their cabin. His death, initially appearing as a tragic accident, soon revealed darker undertones. The investigation uncovered a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation. The affair between Hazel and Dr. Green, hidden from everyone but the two, was a catalyst for the events that unfolded. Dr. Green, once a beacon of hope for struggling couples, was now at the center of a murder investigation. His charming exterior masked a manipulative mind with financial motives. As the truth unraveled, it became clear that Sebastian's death was no accident, but a coldly orchestrated murder. This true crime story delves into the complex relationships, personal histories, and the sinister plot that led to Sebastian Thompson's untimely death. It examines the psychological manipulation employed by Dr. Green, the emotional turmoil of Hazel, and the meticulous investigation that brought the truth to light. This is the chilling account of a couple's therapy retreat that turned deadly, revealing the dark side of love and trust. The couple's therapy retreat was situated in a secluded, luxurious cabin in the mountains, surrounded by dense forests and picturesque views. The location was chosen to provide an escape from the daily stresses of life, offering a peaceful environment conducive to healing and introspection. As Sebastian and Hazel Thompson arrived at the retreat, they were greeted by Dr. David Green. With his warm smile and reassuring presence, he exuded confidence and empathy, instantly putting the participants at ease. Alongside Sebastian and Hazel, there were 3 other couples, each grappling with their own issues. The retreat kicked off with a group session, where each couple introduced themselves and shared their reasons for attending. Sebastian, tall and well-built, spoke with a hint of frustration in his voice. He expressed his desire to rekindle the love and trust that had diminished over the years. Hazel, petite and attractive, echoed his sentiments, though her eyes betrayed a deeper, unspoken sadness. Dr. Green facilitated the sessions with skill and sensitivity, creating an atmosphere of openness and vulnerability. He emphasized the importance of honest communication and trust, urging couples to confront their issues head-on. The initial sessions were intense, with emotions running high as old wounds were reopened. Sebastian and Hazel's interactions were Sebastianed by underlying tension. Sebastian's controlling nature clashed with Hazel's growing sense of independence. Their exchanges were fraught with resentment and unspoken accusations. Dr. Green seemed particularly attentive to their case, often singling them out for deeper analysis. In private sessions, the dynamics were different. Dr. Green focused on building rapport, carefully listening to their individual grievances. He offered Hazel a sympathetic ear, understanding her feelings of entrapment and frustration. For Sebastian, he played the role of a stern yet caring advisor, urging him to let go of his controlling tendencies. The other couples at the retreat observed the palpable tension between Sebastian and Hazel. They noticed how Dr. Green seemed to give Hazel more attention, often engaging her in deeper conversations. This did not go unnoticed by Sebastian, who began to feel a growing sense of unease. The retreat's idyllic setting provided a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The towering pines and serene lake seemed to mock the chaos within the hearts of the participants. As the days progressed, the initial hope for reconciliation gave way to a sense of impending doom. Sebastian and Hazel's relationship, instead of healing, seemed to be unraveling further. Dr. Green's presence, once a source of comfort, became a point of contention. The other couples, too, began to sense that something was amiss, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. As the retreat moved into its third day, the tension reached a boiling point. The stage was set for a tragic turn of events that would shatter the tranquil facade of the retreat and expose the dark secrets lurking beneath. Sebastian Thompson's life was a testament to hard work and ambition. Born into a middle-class family, he had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination and relentless effort. By the age of 45, he had secured a high-ranking position at a prestigious firm, earning a handsome salary and enjoying the perks of success. However, his professional achievements came at a cost. The long hours and constant pressure strained his personal life, creating a rift between him and Hazel. Sebastian's control issues stemmed from his desire for perfection. He demanded the best from himself and those around him, often leading to conflicts at home. His need to control every aspect of his life extended to his marriage, where he expected Hazel to conform to his ideals. This created a suffocating environment for Hazel, who felt increasingly trapped in a role she hadn't chosen. Hazel Thompson, in contrast, had led a more sheltered life. Growing up in a small town, she had married Sebastian young and dedicated herself to being a supportive wife and homemaker. Initially, she found fulfillment in this role, but as the years passed, she began to feel a deep sense of dissatisfaction. The love and attention she once received from Sebastian had dwindled, replaced by criticism and control. Hazel's discontent grew as she watched her husband thrive in his career, while her own aspirations were stifled. She longed for freedom, for a chance to explore her own identity outside the confines of her marriage. It was during this time of vulnerability that she met Dr. David Green. Dr. Green's background was shrouded in mystery. He was a charismatic figure, known for his ability to connect with people on a deep emotional level. His reputation as a skilled therapist had earned him a loyal following, and his retreats were highly sought after. However, beneath his polished exterior lay a manipulative mind. Dr. Green had a history of exploiting vulnerable individuals for personal gain. His charm and intelligence masked a dark side that few were aware of. He had a knack for identifying those who were emotionally fragile and used their insecurities to his advantage. Financial gain was a significant motivator for him, but so was the thrill of control. Hazel's vulnerability and dissatisfaction made her an easy target for Dr. Green. He began their affair with calculated precision, offering her the attention and validation she craved. Their interactions started innocently enough, with late-night conversations and sympathetic listening. Gradually, he intensified his influence, making Hazel dependent on his approval and guidance. Dr. Green's manipulation extended beyond the affair. He subtly planted seeds of doubt and resentment in Hazel's mind, exacerbating the existing tension in her marriage. He portrayed himself as the only one who truly understood her, driving a wedge between her and Sebastian. His ultimate goal was to remove Sebastian from the equation, both to deepen his control over Hazel and to gain financially. Sebastian, unaware of the affair, sensed a shift in Hazel's behavior. She became more distant and withdrawn, often disappearing for hours without explanation. His attempts to confront her were met with defensiveness and anger, further straining their relationship. He turned to Dr. Green for guidance, unaware that the man he trusted was orchestrating his downfall. Dr. Green's plan was meticulous. He exploited the trust placed in him by both Sebastian and Hazel, using their therapy sessions to manipulate their emotions. He created scenarios that heightened the conflict between them, pushing them to the brink. His aim was to drive Sebastian to a point of desperation, where he could be easily eliminated. As the retreat progressed, Dr. Green's influence over Hazel grew stronger. She became increasingly reliant on him, viewing him as her savior from a life of misery. Her perception of Sebastian shifted from a loving husband to an oppressive figure, a change fueled by Dr. Green's constant manipulation. The stage was set for a tragic culmination. Sebastian's frustration and Hazel's growing dependence on Dr. Green created a volatile mix, primed for a deadly outcome. Dr. Green, ever the puppet master, watched as his plan unfolded, confident in his ability to control the narrative. The affair between Hazel and Dr. Green began subtly, almost innocently. During the early sessions, Dr. Green took a special interest in Hazel, recognizing her vulnerability. He offered her a sympathetic ear and gentle words of encouragement, which she desperately needed. Their relationship escalated during private therapy sessions. Dr. Green's office, a cozy room with soft lighting and plush furniture, became a sanctuary for Hazel. She poured out her heart, sharing her frustrations and dreams. Dr. Green listened attentively, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers, making her feel seen and understood. Late-night conversations turned into secret rendezvous. They would meet in secluded spots around the retreat, hidden from the prying eyes of other participants. Their meetings were filled with whispered confessions and stolen kisses, each encounter deepening their bond. Hazel's internal conflict was intense. She felt a growing attachment to Dr. Green, yet guilt gnawed at her conscience. She loved Sebastian, or at least she thought she did. But the connection she felt with Dr. Green was unlike anything she had experienced. He made her feel alive, appreciated, and desired. Dr. Green, on the other hand, was playing a calculated game. He knew how to manipulate Hazel's emotions, feeding her insecurities and deepening her dependence on him. His motives were far from pure. Financial gain and control drove his actions. He saw Hazel not just as a lover, but as a pawn in his grander scheme. Their affair was a dangerous dance fraught with risk. Hazel's behavior became increasingly erratic, her guilt manifesting as anxiety and paranoia. She feared discovery, not just for the affair but for the growing realization that Dr. Green had a hold over her that she couldn't break. One evening, as they met in a secluded part of the retreat, Dr. Green's true nature began to surface. He spoke of their future together, painting a picture of a life free from Sebastian's control. Hazel, caught in his web, began to believe in the possibility of a new life. However, the cost of this new life was steep, and the shadows of doubt began to creep into her mind. Dr. Green's manipulation extended to Sebastian as well. He planted seeds of suspicion, subtly suggesting that Hazel's behavior was a reaction to Sebastian's controlling nature. He urged Sebastian to be more understanding and patient, all the while knowing that his advice would only exacerbate the tension. As the retreat progressed, the affair became more intense, the secrecy heightening the thrill and the danger. One evening, during a particularly heated session, the tension boiled over. Sebastian, feeling cornered and misunderstood, lashed out verbally. He accused Hazel of not trying, of already giving up on their marriage. Hazel, instead of responding, looked to Dr. Green for support. This small gesture was the breaking point for Sebastian. His face contorted with a mixture of hurt and rage, and he stormed out of the session. Dr. Green seized the opportunity to further manipulate Hazel. He comforted her, emphasizing how Sebastian's behavior was proof of his controlling nature. Hazel, emotionally fragile and desperate for validation, absorbed Dr. Green's words, her trust in him growing stronger. The other couples were taken aback by Sebastian's outburst. They had their own issues, but none had witnessed such a dramatic confrontation. Dr. Green addressed the group, explaining that sometimes conflicts needed to be brought to the surface to be resolved. His explanation was met with nods of understanding, though doubts lingered. Sebastian, alone and seething, wandered the retreat grounds. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing Hazel, not just to the problems in their marriage, but to Dr. Green himself. His mind raced with suspicions and fears, each thought more troubling than the last. He needed to find a way to reach Hazel, to break through the barriers that seemed to be growing between them. That night in their cabin, the atmosphere was tense and heavy with unspoken words. Sebastian tried to reach out to Hazel, to apologize and explain, but she was distant, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere. The silence between them was deafening, a stark contrast to the arguments that had filled the past days. Dr. Green, watching from the shadows, felt a sense of triumph. His plan was unfolding perfectly. The tension between Sebastian and Hazel was at its peak, and the stage was set for the next phase of his scheme. He knew that Sebastian was close to breaking, and all he needed was one final push. As the retreat moved into its fourth day, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. The other couples, though unaware of the full extent of the turmoil, sensed that something was terribly wrong. Dr. Green maintained his facade of professionalism, but his eyes betrayed a glint of anticipation. The stage was set for a tragic climax, one that would shatter the lives of those involved and expose the dark undercurrents that had been simmering beneath the surface. The tension, carefully cultivated by Dr. Green, was about to reach a deadly crescendo. The fourth night of the retreat was shrouded in an eerie stillness. The usual sounds of the forest seemed muted, and a heavy fog rolled in, enveloping the cabin in a ghostly embrace. Sebastian and Hazel had retired to their room after another tense day, the silence between them more oppressive than ever. Around midnight, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. The other couples, jolted from their sleep, rushed out of their rooms, confusion and fear etched on their faces. The source of the scream was unmistakable. It came from Sebastian and Hazel's cabin. Dr. Green, appearing composed yet concerned, quickly took charge. He directed the others to stay back while he entered the cabin. Inside, he found Hazel, pale and trembling, standing over Sebastian's lifeless body. The room was in disarray, signs of a struggle evident. Sebastian lay on the floor, his eyes wide open in a final expression of shock and pain. There were visible bruises on his neck, and a broken lamp lay nearby, its jagged edges stained with blood. Hazel, in a state of shock, kept muttering that she didn't know what happened, that she had woken up to find him like this. Dr. Green, masking his satisfaction, wrapped his arm around Hazel, guiding her away from the scene. He assured the other participants that he would handle the situation and contacted the local authorities. Within minutes, the tranquility of the retreat was shattered by the arrival of police and paramedics. The initial investigation pointed to foul play. The signs of struggle and the nature of Sebastian's injuries indicated a violent confrontation. Hazel, as the only other person in the room, became the prime suspect. She was taken into custody for questioning, her dazed state complicating the initial interrogation. Dr. Green, playing the role of the concerned therapist, vouched for Hazel. He explained to the police that she had been under immense stress and that Sebastian had been aggressive. He painted a picture of a woman pushed to her limits, subtly suggesting that she might have acted in self-defense. The police, while not entirely convinced, took Dr. Green's statements into account. They began piecing together the events leading up to the murder. Other participants were interviewed, and it became clear that the Thompsons' relationship had been in turmoil. The tension between them, coupled with Sebastian's controlling nature, provided a potential motive. However, as the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Hazel's account began to emerge. She couldn't clearly remember the events of the night, her memories a foggy jumble of fear and confusion. Her emotional state was fragile, and she seemed genuinely distraught over Sebastian's death. Dr. Green continued to support Hazel, maintaining his role as her confidant and protector. He provided the police with additional details, carefully crafting a narrative that supported his version of events. He portrayed Sebastian as a domineering husband, and Hazel as a victim driven to desperation. As the police delved deeper, they uncovered the affair between Hazel and Dr. Green. This revelation added a new dimension to the case. The affair provided a potential motive for Hazel, but it also raised questions about Dr. Green's involvement. His influence over Hazel was evident, and some investigators began to suspect that he might have had a hand in the events. Dr. Green, sensing the growing suspicion, remained calm and cooperative. He deflected attention from himself, emphasizing his role as a therapist trying to help a troubled couple. His charm and professionalism worked in his favor, but the police weren't entirely convinced. The discovery of the affair shifted the focus of the investigation. Hazel, now seen as both a suspect and a victim, faced intense scrutiny. Dr. Green, while not officially a suspect, was under the radar. The stage was set for a complex and convoluted investigation, with multiple layers of deception and manipulation to unravel. As the night wore on, the sense of tragedy and confusion deepened. Sebastian's death, initially seen as a tragic accident, now appeared to be a murder driven by hidden motives and dark secrets. The serene retreat had become the scene of a chilling crime, and the truth was far from clear. The police investigation into Sebastian Thompson's death quickly intensified. Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, was assigned to the case. She arrived at the retreat the morning after the murder, Determined to uncover the truth behind the tragic event, Detective Collins began by interviewing the other participants. Their accounts painted a picture of escalating tension between Sebastian and Hazel. Most of them mentioned Dr. Green's unusual interest in Hazel and his seemingly antagonistic stance towards Sebastian. The affair, already known to the police, became a focal point in her inquiry. In her interview with Hazel, Detective Collins noticed the woman's fragility and confusion. Hazel's account of the night was fragmented and inconsistent. She repeatedly claimed she couldn't remember what had happened, that she had woken up to find Sebastian dead. Her emotional distress seemed genuine, yet Collins couldn't ignore the possibility that Hazel was involved. Dr. Green was interviewed next. He maintained his composed demeanor, offering a polished account of his interactions with Sebastian and Hazel. He admitted to the affair, describing it as a regrettable but understandable consequence of Hazel's unhappy marriage. He framed himself as a supportive figure, trying to help Hazel through her emotional turmoil. Despite his cooperative attitude, Detective Collins couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Green was hiding something. His responses were too calculated, too perfect. She decided to delve deeper into his background, looking for any signs of past misconduct. The retreat's other participants provided further insights. Several of them mentioned the escalating arguments between Sebastian and Hazel, and a few noted that Dr. Green seemed to exacerbate these conflicts rather than resolve them. One participant, a woman named Rachel, mentioned overhearing a particularly heated argument between Sebastian and Hazel the night before the murder. Detective Collins followed up on Rachel's lead, examining the retreat's layout and the possibility of others hearing the argument. The cabin's isolated location made it unlikely that anyone outside could have heard, suggesting that Rachel might have been closer than she admitted. Collins began to consider the possibility of other witnesses or accomplices. The forensic team provided crucial evidence. The bruises on Sebastian's neck indicated strangulation, and the broken lamp suggested a violent struggle. However, there were no defensive wounds on Hazel, raising questions about her involvement in the physical altercation. The presence of an unidentified fingerprint on the lamp added another layer of mystery. As the investigation progressed, Collins discovered financial irregularities linked to Dr. Green. Large sums of money had been transferred from Hazel's account to an offshore account in Dr. Green's name. This revelation pointed to a clear financial motive, suggesting that Dr. Green had been manipulating Hazel not just emotionally, but financially as well. Armed with Hazel's partial recollection and the financial evidence, Detective Collins confronted Dr. Green. His calm facade cracked as he faced the mounting evidence. The fingerprint on the broken lamp, initially unidentified, was found to belong to Dr. Green. This evidence, combined with Hazel's testimony and the financial trail, solidified the case against him. Dr. Green's manipulative tactics had backfired, leaving a trail of evidence that pointed directly to him. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rachel Foster, meticulously laid out the evidence against Dr. Green. They highlighted his manipulative tactics, the financial exploitation of Hazel, and the clear motive behind Sebastian's murder. Witnesses, including Hazel and other retreat participants, testified about the escalating tension and Dr. Green's undue influence. The jury, after deliberating for several hours, found Dr. Green guilty of first-degree murder and financial exploitation, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the end, the truth had been uncovered, and justice had been served. The scars left behind were deep, but they were also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Hazel and the other survivors found a way to move forward, their experiences shaping a future where trust and healing could coexist.